2015 meeting of the Emeryville Planning Commission. Can we have the roll call, please?
Commissioner Cardoza.
Here.
Commissioner Donaldson.
Here.
Commissioner Gunkel.
Here.
Commissioner Keller.
Here.
Commissioner Coomerly has an excused absence this evening, and we are expecting Vice Chair Tan shortly. Chair Moss.
Here.
So we have a quorum of 5 commissioners at the moment.
Great. The next item on our agenda is public comment. So this is a time for comments from the public on items that are not on the agenda. So if anyone would like to speak, please come forward.
Yes, good evening, Planning Commission members. I'm here tonight to talk about the Emeryville and the great opportunity that I think we have. As you know, the P-bid is going to expire. And there's a question about renewing the P-bid, or there's a question of looking at other options. I think the city should control the Emeryville instead of a group of private property owners. If that happened, then you might be able to say to Sherwin-Williams, for example, well, maybe you could have 100 less parking spaces if we could ensure Emeryville service. So you would have a mechanism to encourage additional funding for the Emeryville and better service for residents. Now, I attend lots of regional meetings, and the proximity of transit to development is very significant. I think we would be able to get a lot of more funding for the Emeryville if it was a city-run program. It doesn't mean you have to accept federal money, so it doesn't mean you have to be subject to those requirements. But the state cap and trade is going to be quadrupling the amount of money they have for transit. And that's because that's the primary factor to eliminate greenhouse gas. That's one of the things cap and trade money was created for, so there's going to be a real focus on getting money for transit. I think we should take advantage of that opportunity. I think if the community controlled it, like I say, you could be involved in land use planning. And, you know, if you want a new route, you could have it considered. I mean, the way the TMA operates is they change service, they stop service, they don't notify anybody, they don't tell anybody what they're doing. And the city staff doesn't want anything to do with running it. So we don't get to look at that option. When people at Watergate say, gee, the service was eliminated, the staff says, well, we can't do anything about it. That's not acceptable. I mean, that's not acceptable. They can stop service anywhere, do anything they want, and there's no control over, no service policy. When you take a city with so many commercial owners and then you add some residential owners, those residential owners don't have any say. 90% of the city's property is controlled by commercial owners. So if the city doesn't control the Emeryville, it'll be controlled by private property owners, the people who benefit the most. That's not the best benefit for the city, and shortchanges what we can get. Thank you.
Are there any other speakers? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to the action recap. Does anyone have any comments on the action recap for the February meeting?
I move approval.
I'll second.
Great. Any objections? Right, great, thank you. And then we will move on to the director's report.
Okay, well, first let me tell you what the City Council has done since you last met. They've had 2 meetings on March 3rd and March 17th. On March 3rd, the Council approved the annual report on implementation of the general plan, including the housing element in calendar year 2014. In the section covering zoning adequate to meet the city's housing allocation, the Council amended the report to note that zoning alone does not address the affordability issue or ensure that affordable units will be built. New tools are needed to address the affordability crisis. As you may recall, the Commission reviewed and approved the report at your January meeting, and it has now been submitted to the state in time to meet the April 1st deadline. At the March 17th meeting, the Council approved a memorandum of understanding with the Association of Bay Area Governments for a cooperative effort of all the cities and counties in the East Bay corridors from Pinole down to Union City for planning coordinated development along those corridors. Our efforts, of course, will focus on the San Pablo Avenue corridor that runs from Oakland to Pinole. Also on March 17th, the Council approved a restructuring of the city's committees, eliminating some committees, adding some new ones, and combining and modifying others. While this affects most of the committees that are staffed by the Community Development Department, it does not affect the Planning Commission. And in other news, as you all know, but just for the benefit of the public, and we will be sending postcards out to the entire community about this. There will be a joint meeting of the City Council and Planning Commission on Saturday, May 2nd, to discuss regulations, incentives, and guidelines for multi-unit residential developments, to address the issues of unit mix, family-friendly design, affordability, ownership housing, and the bonus system. The meeting will be from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. here in the City Council chambers. Refreshments and childcare will be provided. I previously emailed all of you a schedule that flows from that joint meeting, and that calls for the Commission to consider the new provisions on May 28th and for the Council to consider them on June 16th. And assuming everything goes according to plan, the second reading would then be July 7th, and there would be an effective date of August 6th. So again, joint meeting, City Council, Planning Commission, Saturday, May 2nd, 10 a.m. here in the council chambers. I want to let you know that I will be at the annual American Planning Association National Planning Conference in Seattle in the latter part of April, and I will miss the April Planning Commission meeting. However, Miru will be here, and she will be in charge, so you'll be in good hands. Finally, just want to alert you all that Bike to Work Day is coming up. It will be on Thursday, May 14th. I realize that's a month and a half away, but I just want to make sure you've got it on your radar and on your calendars. A community bike ride is being planned starting at 8 a.m. here in front of City Hall. This will be a short ride up to the Energizer station up on Adeline Street and anywhere else that people feel like going, I guess. The details are still being worked out. But I wanted to just make sure that you save the date and put it on your calendars and look for an announcement coming out in the future. Again, Thursday, May 14th at 8 a.m. in front of City Hall. And that concludes my report. I'd be happy to respond to any questions you may have.
Any questions?
Do we have any answer to the state's appeal to the Supreme Court over our properties?
No.
April 30th, April?
Oh, okay. I thought it was going to happen sometime in March, so if it's April, my mistake.
Do you know?
No, we just received the state's, basically we're still waiting for the Supreme Court to weigh in and decide whether or not they're going to take up the state's petition for cert, so.
And I thought they were going to tell us by March, but if it's April, that's fine.
It's probably April at this
Okay.
point, yeah.
Any other questions? All right, thank you. All right, with that, we will move on to disclosures of conflict of interest and ex parte communications. So this is a time on the agenda for commissioners to disclose any potential conflicts of interest or any communications that we've had regarding any of the items that are on our agenda tonight. Is there anyone who would like to disclose anything?
Yes, I had a meeting with the developer of the Nady property and also of the Sherman Williams site.
Okay, thanks.
And I'll be stepping down, recusing myself during the first item on the agenda because of my proximity and a potential conflict of interest.
Thanks. All right, so with that, we will move on to our study sessions for this evening. So our first study session is the Marketplace Redevelopment Parcel C. Can we have the staff report, please?
Good evening, Chairman Moss, Planning Commission. This is a study session on the Marketplace Redevelopment Project, Parcel C. The Commission has been seeing a number of study sessions on this project, and this is the proposed build-out. And just as a quick reminder of the various parcels, today we'll be talking about Parcel C. In the past, you have seen the proposal for Parcel C in conjunction with Parcel B and the realignment of the Shellmount Street. And you've been seeing study sessions individually on Parcel A, the Shellmount site building, the residential building, and Parcel D, which is the theater residential building. In January, you saw a study session on the Shellmount realignment as well as parcels B and C. At this point, the applicant has revised its phasing, and I'll talk about that. In terms of how it's actually going to pan out in construction, the first thing that's going to happen on the ground is the relocation of the Shell Mount Street. This will be followed by construction of the grocery store, which is on parcel C, and that would be without the residential component that is associated with the grocery store. The third item would be the construction of the redesigned and expanded Christie Avenue Park, which the Commission has approved in the past, earlier this year. This would be followed by construction of parcels A, D, and then the residential component of parcel C. And the last stage would be constructions of parcel B, which is the garage building, and the retail pad, which is known as parcel F. So today what we are going to be talking about is only parcel C, which is the grocery store plus residential development associated with that, as well as the realignment of the Shell Mount Street. In terms of the past study sessions, in December of 2013, you first saw the first study session on this project, and that included both parcel C and B. This was followed by another study session in December a year later, which was on the overall scheme of the proposed marketplace redevelopment project. Then in January of this year, you saw a FDP study session for parcel B and C and the realignment road. And today we are looking at only at parcel C and the road realignment. And this FDP, which would be consisting of parcel C and the road realignment, is at this point tentatively scheduled for the May Planning Commission hearing. So the current proposal for parcel C is a 30,000 square feet grocery store, much like what you saw at the January study session, in a small 2,100 square feet of retail. And the final residential count is 69 residential units. The division of studios and 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, you can see on the screen in front of you. And about 62% of the total units are studios and 1-bedroom, and 38% are 2-bedrooms and 3-bedrooms. So this is the site plan for this FDP, which shows the realigned Shell Mount Street, which is right here, and it also shows the current configuration of the street. And you have parcel C, which has which is the grocery store, and it's got a residential on 62nd Street and Market Drive. So essentially, that's not changed. What you're going to be looking at today is more refined proposal for this project, and I'll go through the various modifications that the applicant has made in response to the comments that they heard at the January study session. So this is the parcel C rendering, and this is the first floor or the ground floor plan, where you have the grocery store in red, and you have townhouses on 62nd Street and on Market Drive. So in terms of modifications, what you see today is a reorganized loading to separate grocery loading from the customer resident vehicular traffic. There would be a truck bay, would have a gate that would be closed a majority of the time. There is further defined loading areas for the grocery store on 63rd Street, and truck templates have been provided in the packet. This was directly in response to how the loading would occur and whether that was feasible or not. You also have a circulation plans that more clearly shows the operation of loading, service, and trash pickup, as well as vehicular, bicycle, and pedestrian movements. Site plans and elevations of grocery store before the residential component will be added is also provided. This was again in response to the Commission comment regarding what the building would look like between the time that the grocery store is constructed and the residential is added. More further defined unit plans have been provided, and more developed rooftop amenity area is provided, where they identify a bocce court, vegetable garden planters, a covered outdoor kitchen, and barbecue area with seating. In addition, there was a discussion on how the delivery details would work for this particular grocery store. Keep in mind, we still do not know which grocery store, which tenant of the grocery store will be going in. But in terms of delivery, this is what we have. On weekdays, it will be 3:30 a.m. to 1 p.m., and on weekends, 4 a.m. to noon. There was also a discussion last time about the backup peepers. This has been identified as a concern for the adjacent residents, regardless of where the loading dock is located. And in response, the applicant has indicated that all the residential units on the north side of Parcel C, as well as on the east, south, and west sides of Parcel D, which is the theater site, would receive noise insulation treatments that would both block the railroad noise as well as the backup beepers. Do keep in mind that adjacent or kitty corner to the grocery store, you do have the Emmy building, which is almost constructed, so that's already there. I will now hand over the presentation to Arnold, our design consultant, who has been working on this project, and he will go through his comments, which have been outlined in the staff report.
Good evening, thank you. I'm not going to try to take up too much of your time. I want to point out a few things and let the project architect present their project. I just want to start with the current proposal, just to note, I've probably seen this in the plans. On this one, you notice it does show the double entrance point into the garage, and it does show some slight changes in the layout of the building footprint on the Shellmont side of that. And I'll move forward, and you can see it here where they have the two entry points now. So it's a little bit wider than it was before, so there's a visual effect on the street there. And also the entry into the grocery store, you see it was previously curved at that corner. Now those two things have been straightened at that corner. So we'll come back to this. And there was one more townhouse along the 62nd Street side, so they dropped from like 8 to 7 on that side. The overview, this was the January study session, kind of overall massing as it faced the park. And I just wanted to point out, when you look at this one, you'll notice that the upper parking lot area, there's a few small structures there for mechanical and other types of uses for access. And then when you're going to the current proposal, one thing I want to point out is the amount of mechanical and the size of mechanical things has increased quite a bit, and so there's a concern about their visibility, and you see that they're on the front side of where the entry to the grocery is and possibly visible from Shellmount. So I just wanted to make sure everyone was aware of that. This was the January study session kind of perspective, very nice perspective, and it showed kind of an intention to curve that corner so as you came down Shellmount, you'd get a real sort of good kind of identity to that building. And something at the top of it where it was sort of connected into it so that it would go through and up to the penthouse where the access was. Now this did show the areas to the side of that were open, and they've changed that also, but there's been some changes. Again, this is the January. You see the roof level configuration of the access down and the ground level, and then the elevation there. And you also notice on the elevation at the far right side of the elevation, there's a brick at the corner. It's at the corner facing the park also as it turns that corner. Now you notice in the current proposal, it's changed quite a bit where you're not getting that curved feature. The building's been straightened out. The identity is not quite the same, and then the penthouse features are more of separate structures on the roof. So there's a concern that maybe it's taken a slight step backwards in this area in terms of how that experience might be coming down Shellmount, and so that would be something that we just wanted to point out for your comment.
Can you go back to the January proposal for a second? I just want to, okay, thanks.
Okay. And that's how it is now.
On the January proposal, that curved screen on the top, was that to cover mechanical or what?
That was the entry, let's go to if you look at the top drawing there, you see the stair and the elevators, and they had the kind of the facade kind of continue up to sort of contain that on the outside, whereas on the current version, it's sort of a set-back penthouse. So now it's kind of just set back from that, and they also have a kind of a canopy created up there. This is just the elevation that's currently proposed, and the shaded areas up top, you can see where those mechanical spaces on the kind of almost at the center, and then the access point towards a little more to the right. And again, you can see in section where those things occur and the relative height of those elements. So that element seems fairly tall, so that's part of the concern also. Okay. And you're also seeing the grids that they put in to sort of mimic the window frames. That was a change from the earlier one, which is a positive change, I think. Wanted to kind of go over a little bit of the park side too. You notice here, this main point is the brick is at that corner, and it's wrapping the corner on the January, and then you have at the top, it's kind of hard to see, but you have a trellis that wraps all the way around the corner. And now on this latest version, that's been changed to more of a stucco presentation, so you don't have quite the contrast or the anchoring of the corner that you had on the other one. So to go back, hold on a second. There was the brick, and then the metal and the brick, and the upper floor was sort of set back and of a different material. And now it's sort of kind of blends in with the stucco. And then there was some concerns about how the development of those trellis elements really come across. They don't seem right now to be developed that much, and so we would be looking to see, well, what are those really going to look like? The other street, which faces parcel D, so we have the townhomes facing each other, residential street. This was the January session. And this one, main point I want to make is the way it was worked is that top level was kind of set back with a continuous trellis all the way along, so the scale was a little bit different. And so you had the more of a horizontal presentation. And in the new one, it's still attractive and has nice massing, but it's just a little bit different, and they're kind of accentuating the vertical elements a little bit more. And again, those trellises up the top seem like they're maybe just placeholders. They're not really quite what they might be. Also, on this one, I want to point out the window frames. This has that really warehouse type of aesthetic a lot more, and the windows look like warehouse windows. You typically would see those metal windows in this image. And of course, here's just the elevation. You see the pictures that go with it. They're showing some kind of typical window frames that you might see in that type of building.
Could you flip that elevation back to the January just quickly?
This?
Yeah.
That one?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want.
Yeah, I know it's a lot to. Okay, so I'll go back. So then, this is the current version.
Is the plan the same, or do the floor plans change too?
Floor plans, I believe, are pretty close, except for at the top floor, they're a little bit different. The units have been evolving. And in fact, I want to mention that, as an aside, that some of the comments about the unit plans were actually in an earlier set of drawings than the ones that you did receive. So if some of the comments seem to make no sense at all, it's for good reason, because the units are different. So. But I think there's they're working on the units, and they're working on the massing of the building too. The one other thing I wanted to call attention to in this drawing is the entrances to the loading and the vehicular access coming in off of 62nd. Of course, it's much wider now, so there's some concern about, well, you're breaking that pattern, and there's a door, I believe, on the loading, and we don't really have much information on what that's going to look like now, but they have gotten these two large entrances next to each other does kind of break that pattern a little bit, and that's sort of, I think, a constraint just has to be dealt with as best as possible. This image, the reason I wanted to talk about this one briefly, and I believe, hopefully if it's still current, you guys will correct me if it's not. This was from the end of February submittal. The two issues, this one. One is the windows. This one calls out as vinyl frame windows, so we don't have much information on those windows yet, but typically with the vinyl sash windows, without really seeing exactly what these frames look like and how they fit in, it's really unclear if they're going to really kind of portray the character of the structure, or if they're going to look like something different. So that's something that there's a concern to really clarify what's looked at there. The stucco and the brick and the setbacks, all of those things look like they're really positive features, give it a very urbane look to the building. Don't really know what the stucco finish is going to be like. That we're interested to find out a little bit more about that. But the windows are an issue. A second issue is the privacy, and so you notice that the units along the street, right now the plans are calling out of an 18-inch level change from the sidewalk to the unit, and what we don't know is 18 inches the minimum, the maximum, what that looks like, because there might be some sloping on the street. And 18 inches is not very much of a level change, so you're having the problem of people looking into the units. So our recommendation is to increase that to at least 24 inches, because we want the windows to be as big as possible, because they're very deep units and we want to get as much light into them as possible. Also around those openings, and the project architect might want to speak to this a little bit more, it's pretty open and there's not a lot of sense of visual definition or screening, not a lot of plant materials, maybe all clear glass right now it looks like. So we're not really clear how they're going to maintain the privacy into those units without it just becoming people closing the blinds. 'Cause pretty much what we see is people just close their blinds, and then all you see is blinds from the street. And so that's the concern on that. So this privacy on this would be something that we would want to see looked at, and preferably raising that floor level some. These are the current units. Only want to make a few comments. Now these are the ones where I was mentioning comments in the staff report were from a package that was slightly earlier than this, so it might not match in all cases. A little bit of a concern on some of the units that are, let's see, these are one-bedroom units. I really don't want to look at those. So these units are mixed up, but on the two-bedroom units, there's a concern about the table and the living area not quite being big enough to really function for a family. So you see that you have a sofa, and then you have a small table in there, and those dimensions are really tight to actually, get more people in that unit. And you might want to notice that, how little space. It's a pretty big unit, but how little space is actually ends up being in the living and dining. It's only about less than a quarter of the unit, like around 20% of the unit on the 2B example. So that's kind of a struggle point. And at least with those units, I believe they are curve facing the park. There may be opportunities to modify that, maybe rather than a deck out there, maybe project out a bay feature or something like that to give a little more space to those units. This is showing some of the townhouse units. Before that, one of the things I wanted to point out with the slides out here is the unit C. Staff really likes that unit. It's a nice elongated unit. It's a corner unit. It seems to be very well laid out for family-friendly kind of living. And of course, there's four of those units, and they have about between the 2 and the 3 bedroom. They're about 38%, 39%, I think, overall, but it's mostly 2 bedroom. Lastly, just really quickly, this is an area that's kind of there's not much information on this first phase and how this is really going to work. We have a parking area on the back of the grocery store, and we have a loading dock and the garage entry. The the discussion previously was to provide some sort of a kind of temporary facade. And right now, we're just not really sure what that is beyond a concept. So I guess we're all looking for, more information there. I think that's as much as I thought would be useful to say, unless you have any questions for me.
Is there any kind of traffic study done yet relative to delivery trucks?
Well, I'm going to defer to, he's asking about traffic studies for the delivery trucks.
Yeah, we are doing the study. We don't have the results yet, but we expect that to happen very quickly. So, and we would have that cleared up before this project comes back for consideration.
So I think there were some recommendations and staff recommendations. One would be to maybe go back on that front facade by the grocery store to something closer to what it was. Two would be to address the mechanical things that might be visible from the street. And then three would be maybe to go back to the brick on the corner between the park and in front of the grocery store, so it kind of gives a more balanced material presentation.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm curious if you can point me. I've kind of scoured the East Bay, and I've yet to find a good example of a project that has a sufficient grade separation for the ground floor residential units where residents feel comfortable opening their blinds. So I'm curious if you have a good example.
I think you're correct. It's very hard to find a good example. I think it's been an ongoing problem. The Essex project, I think, has that problem, and when I walked by those units, they're all kind of covered up. Now, people are renting the units. That's not an issue, but they're all sort of covering up the blinds. So it's a very common problem. I wish I knew one in the East Bay that really kind of achieved that sort of objective. And I think it's just something that we're struggling with right now.
Thanks.
Were your comments provided to the applicant, pretty recently, or did they have an opportunity to address them? Do we know that if they're working on some of these items?
The applicant received the comments at the same time as you did in the staff report. So I'm not sure whether they're going to be responding to that today or not, but yeah.
So we still have no elevations of the building without residential?
I'll let them answer that.
Yeah, this is what we have. At least that's what staff has. I'm not sure whether they have anything more than that today or not. But we would want to see that before it comes back for approval.
Because in effect, they could elect not to ever build the residential section.
That is always a possibility. So if there are no more questions of Arnold or myself, what we are looking in terms of direction from the commission is on the design of the building, of course, and particularly the unit mix, whether this commission is satisfied with the unit mix, and then also whether the commission concurs with the recommendations of our design consultant. So if there are no more questions, I will hand it over to the applicant for a presentation.
Do you have any information on what the rental rates have been, rent-up rates have been at Park on Powell, which does have 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units, which are in greatest demand and which are renting?
Well, they have, what I understand, that they have already leased Building B, which is the one that is closest to Doyle Street. In terms of rents, I don't have that information, but they're very high.
No, but are there a lot of 2 and 3 bedroom units?
On that building, yes, there are a lot of 2 bedrooms. But again, the majority is 1 bedroom and studios.
Something related to that, I talked to the leasing person at the Essex building, and they said that they're renting the 2 bedrooms are going very fast, especially the corner units, and then the townhomes on the first floor rented up very quickly. And also, they said they're not getting a lot of people with older children, but a lot of, they are getting families with young children, for whatever that's worth.
I have one more question for you. The ground floor units have 2 points of access. They have the front door on the street, and they have a rear door from a corridor.
Yes.
If that corridor access was eliminated, would all of the units, those ground floor units, would they all have to have level entries for? I mean, or how would the accessibility, I guess, requirements work?
Well, I'll let the project architect give you their take on it, but my understanding, talking to the city's code consultant, is that for two-level units, the requirement is a 10% accessibility for two-level units where they're served by an elevator floor. So I would think in this case, they would have to have some sort of accessibility for wheelchair on some of those units, but the architect may have a different take on how that should be interpreted.
Okay.
The ADA requirements.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, with that, I think we'll invite the applicant up.
Very marked. That's right. Good evening, Commissioners. It's nice to be back in front of you again. As you know, this is I think the fourth study session we'll have had for this Parcel C. It's been a very good process, and I think it's helped us develop a project that is improved and has continued to meet the needs and the requirements of the community. We're hoping to gain sufficient feedback tonight from you so that we can make the required changes, and then we come back in front of you in May, we'll be in a position to get hopefully a final FDP. So we welcome your feedback tonight and help guide us where we need to be to get to that point. There was comments made about family-friendly housing, and the question or the comment that the mix that you have in your package has a mix of 38% of 2- and 3-bedroom family-friendly. As you know, we've spent a lot of time working with the community to make a better project, and we've spent time talking individual members of the community, to the staff, to the Planning Commission, to the City Council about this issue, and we've taken it to heart. We think that of the 3 residential parcels we have, A, C, and D, C is the most suited for family-friendly housing, given that it fronts on the park and it's removed and sheltered more from the railroad tracks. Parcel A is not as well suited for family-friendly because it's right up against the tracks and it's right in the mix of the retail. But as it relates to Parcel C, we are going to increase the family-friendly mix to 57% from 38%, so that the 2- and 3-bedroom mix will increase to that level. And we're hopeful that that goes a long way in meeting your requests for more family-friendly units. And it's a balance for us because we want to have units that are marketable and the economics work, but we think this could be a good compromise. And then you'll see that later in the presentation from our architect in terms of how that mix might look. Also want to give you an update on the status of the negotiations with the grocery store. We've been going back and forth. We've traded a couple of lease drafts. They've asked us not to announce who they are until we have the lease finalized, but we're very, very close. They continue to have a requirement that we deliver the premises to them the end of 2016, and we need about 6 months to complete the working drawings and obtain a permit, and we need about 12 months to build the project. So that gives you a sense of the time frame that we're working under. And then lastly, I'd like to address a comment that was made with regard to the delivery trucks and the backup beepers. We have been designing A and D and C to mitigate the noise that's generated from the railroad tracks. And we're doing that through sound insulation and glazing and insulated glass. And we reached out to 2 different acoustic consultants to ask them how we would treat the buildings for mitigating the backup beepers from the delivery trucks. And they told us, and I have a copy of a letter that I'll share with you and provide to staff, that the requirements to mitigate against the backup beepers were less than what we were doing for the railroad tracks on the north, east, and south side. We would upgrade the mitigation on the west side, and that would meet the requirements and mitigate the backup sound. So I'm happy to share that letter from our acoustic engineer so you can see the results of that. And then as it relates to the Emmy building, which is already built, my guess is because it was built within the last 2 years and that east side of that building faced the railroad tracks, that they had most likely put in the same sound insulation in their windows and doors that we're planning to do. But we can verify on that. That's all I have right now, and for that I'd like to have Aaron run through the project with you, and if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask us.
Thanks. It's nice to see you again. Clearly, you're familiar with the project as a whole, and I think, like Arnold, we'd like to just focus on what's different, how have we reacted. Right out of the gates, Commissioner Gunkel, we work constantly, so there are things in tonight's presentation that are not in your package and staff hasn't seen, and it's constantly reacting, and even the comment about family-friendly housing is as recent as 24 hours, and so we're working through what we can while retaining the basic tenets of the building, what we think is already successful. Where we're going is clearly this is the first big step towards creating a cohesive urban neighborhood that has all the pluses and challenges of an urban neighborhood. But our direction is to create a place that truly feels of the place and doesn't look like it's been dropped in from somewhere else. And so the character of the inside of the public market when the renovation's complete, or the base of Parcel B, or even Parcel F, or Parcel C on the upper right, is to try to create a connective environment that truly feels like a real place and not like a fabricated vision of some other location. The project, of course, has been going for a while, so the PDP approval dates to 2008. Mark and his team got involved a couple of years ago. We actually first came before you December of 2013 with a FDP study for a one-story grocery store and 30,000 feet. So some of the pieces have changed, and we've kind of plodding along trying to get clarity with the park approval underway. I think there's a lot of the pieces are starting to lock in, and now we're hoping to get the grocery store and road approved so we can get into construction later this year. There's clearly a lot of components, just kind of, and clearly all of these are coming at you at the same time, and so appreciate that when you give feedback to folks on Parcel A or Parcel D, that we're trying to roll that into what we're doing on Parcel C as well. So there is an LOI in place with this grocery store. Mark and I have visited several of their outlets. These are photos from their stores. It's a really terrific brand that's new to the Bay Area and we think is a perfect fit for Emeryville. we put these photos together to highlight some of the things we think are a great fit for the public market as well as for Emeryville. They have a bakery on premises. They do prepared foods. Everything's sustainable and fresh and locally sourced. And the great thing about it is that they have 50 different delivery vehicles that come and visit them on a day, because the salsa comes from somewhere and the orange juice comes from somewhere. And it's not one big truck that comes from a distribution warehouse. Obviously, the challenge is that's 50 different trucks over the course of the day. They're not all big trucks. Some of them are pickup trucks. Some of them are vans that are just driving over the hill. So we're working with this, but we think the end goal and the sort of the end game for Emeryville is they get this phenomenal anchor tenant, which really is the catalyst. The project works because there's a great grocery store. The project has a lot of challenges without a great catalytic tenant in the early phase. So when we saw you more than a year ago, there was definitely challenges to loading, and there was, I think, a lot of feedback that a one-story building wasn't the appropriate density for this site. And so when we came back to you, it was a multi-story building with a residential wrapper. Again, we have a site with no backs. So we're, you know, if you have no back, you have to have all front, which gets challenging with something like a grocery store, which, you know, in our kind of conventional experience always has a pretty unsightly back. And so in this case, the back is enveloped into a multi-use building. Some great feedback we got in January, which was, what is an appropriate family-friendly mix? You know, solving the deliveries is obviously a key component. There were certainly comments that the rendering at the bottom of the screen from January looked too much like a ballpark, or a parking garage looked too much like a parking garage, and that is the challenge. So a lot of our work has been, well, how do you make it look like a warehouse building or like a building that made sense in a place that has an industrial heritage and yet isn't an industrial building and isn't overly nostalgic. And then there's obviously the big outstanding question of how quickly does the residential wrapper come in, and what is its what does it look like in the interim? To just kind of tick through the changes, and I think they highlight a lot of the issues, and again, some of these are a couple of days old and some of them are 2 months old. So one of the staff comments which we appreciate is that, you know, we looked at the myriad of delivery vehicles and how they might come and at what time of day, but key to that was, how does the occasional big truck get in? And by big truck, it's not even a really big truck. It's not the big Safeway truck. It's still a notch below that, a WB50, but it's still here. Yeah.
And by occasional, what do you mean?
Every morning, or most mornings, there's likely to be a largish truck. So, you know, greater than 30 feet. So in our, you know, in this, the red is sort of a bigger than a box truck. That's some kind of articulated truck. That's not a giant Allied moving truck, but it's
yeah, maybe now is not the time, but at some point, I think I, for one, would love to have you explain exactly how to read that chart.
Yeah. We'll come back to that. But suffice to say, for this sheet, there was a desire that the trucks not use the wide 64th Street and back all the way down Market Drive. It was to swing in from Christie or from Shellmound, and that there may be an implication on the bulb outs. So initial study, and I think this is for debate with the commission, is if a truck approaches from Shellmound, if we shave the bulb out, I think you're all familiar with that term, on the south side of 63rd Street, and we do a little widening in and around Market Drive, kind of getting back to a similar width that it is today, then a truck of this size can be accommodated and back in, and then he can leave out Market Drive. So again, this is a several second back in to a loading dock with a gate. So the loading dock remains closed most of the time. Approaching from Christie, whether from again, it's really challenging from the south because of the tightness of these sort of pedestrian scaled streets. But if we shave the bulb out on the south side, which was put there to match what was being done on the north side, again, similar movements. So I think this feedback, which we got in the staff report late last week, we would certainly expect to apply to our updated package. The delivery schedule, and this is actually straight from the grocer with the names removed. So each text entry represents a different proprietor. So the bread guy actually shows up every day of the week. So do some of the other folks. There's like 7 different coffee people because there's sort of every different coffee person. And then these represent windows because delivery guys aren't always on time. So in this sense, this looks like a lot of red. It's only one person who delivers at some point over that window. And again, keep in mind, this is a delivery schedule for an urban store 1,000 miles from here and isn't necessarily representative of what would happen here. It's simply a communication tool that we're using to kind of see you through. But you get a sense for a series of morning deliveries of largish trucks, and the bulk of everything that shows up comes in small vehicles, vans, 20-foot box trucks, pickup trucks, and comes over the course of the day. So we've allocated some space on the street for that.
This schedule was provided to us from the grocer, and it is representative of a urban store they have and they operate. So, and they suspect it would be very similar here.
Does that help, Commissioner Moss?
Yeah, I think so. So I just want to make sure I'm reading this right. So so you said the red is the largest trucks? It represents the largest trucks. So am I correct then to say that on most days of the week there would be, in the morning, there would be 3 or 4 deliveries from those large trucks? Is that right?
Yes. Yeah, up to probably 3 or 4. Right. And those are the trucks that would require use of the loading dock, and everything else, would fit in a parking space.
And some of those are windows too. So if you look on, say, the left-hand side there, it's really, you've got one, it's 2. There's 3 blocked out.
Yeah,
it's
one,
really 2
2,
deliveries.
right.
Because it's just a window of time. And if you go to the next date, there's probably 3 dates, because there's blocks of time. There's the first block, the second block, and then the third block. Those would be the large trucks.
So it's certainly different than a Safeway, which gets a single truck every morning, typical, or 2 trucks, plus all the other stuff. I mean, so much of a Safeway is supplied by a big truck. And those big trucks that you think about are typically bigger than these trucks. But again, this is still a little bit a model of another place that has a lot of similar qualities to Emeryville, but isn't Emeryville. So,
and part of the thing is that if you want this fresh produce and organics, you're going to have more deliveries because you have more providers. And it's just the trade-off of that purveyor.
Oh, sorry. So we're thinking of it, and a big reason that we went to the second delivery bay, which Arnold touched on, was to anticipate conflicts and allocate space. And we think through design solutions, the gates, how the facade's treated, how the streetscape's treated, that it's a reasonable trade-off of 60, 70 feet of pavement for basically putting all these back-of-house uses behind closed doors. But it's the obvious trade-off. We certainly got feedback from you all that there were other ways to bring trucks in, and we really have belabored this. And there are pros and cons of every solution, and we as a team with our traffic consultant and in conversations with other, people related to the project, it just feels like this is the best place, and we think this is a workable solution. Total change of gears, and in fact, a big reason why we go to great pains to bury trucks and service and trash deep into a building is that this is a phenomenal opportunity to bring family-friendly living to Emeryville. As a young family with a 1-year-old who lives 3 miles from here, and my kid loves to swing at Doyle Hollis, there's a lot of Emeryville that's not suitable for us because there aren't the amenities that we're now going to have because of the Christie Park expansion. So again, the Essex building is a great beneficiary of this park, and Parcel C, to a large extent, is really the front and center on this great park. And so what we've done is we've oriented our family-friendly units, the 2 and 3 bedroom units, to the park to make sure that there is that connection and there, it's an easy way out. And so the bulk of what is seen here in the lower rendering are the more family-friendly geared units. Another question, and certainly there's been a lot of dialogue offline with staff and Arnold and others about how do you design more family-friendly units and what does it mean to have a family-friendly unit versus a 3-bedroom that's really great for a bunch of college kids. And frankly, what you do for a family is what anybody else would really enjoy too. There's a spacious vestibule that's big enough for a stroller. There's washer dryer. They tend to be, if they can be side by side, great, because there's more room. Living, dining, kitchen works. There's places to do homework. And so a lot of the revisions to our plan plans have been to incorporate these features at each step. Now, it's still urban living, and there are still some trade-offs that one makes to live in an urban setting that's different from a suburban house. But in large part, we think that the kinds of units and the space we're allocating and the dimensions we're providing are giving the potential for that. And then, how do you translate that outward? So one was to think about a roof amenity that was private to the residents, that took advantage of the views to the bay and the city, that took advantage of views overlooking the park, that had the kind of activities that we think folks who would tend to live here would want to do. And so it's space upstairs for a birthday party, playing bocce with your kids, just places to hang out, or maybe have a little vegetable garden. And then a big change that has come into the plan in the last couple of weeks is that the grocery store, because it has a lot of prepared foods and fresh foods and has kind of on-site cooking, would prefer that there not be a cafe next to it. And so, okay, that's challenging as a retail project, but it's also a great opportunity to improve the residential. And so what I'm showing here in the lower corner was all formerly the retail space, and the concept of adding an additional townhouse with the potential for an amenity. And this townhouse would be a 3-bedroom because it would take advantage of 3 bedrooms upstairs. And that would be a club room or a place to do, any kind of resident activity. But it would present itself to the street much like a commercial entity. So you'd have a great wall of glass and activity behind it. So this is not in your packet. This is literally the last couple weeks. We've added a unit to some unit counts. We'll show you where we've changed it. But generally, we went from 69 to 70 units with the addition of another 3-bedroom.
And we should probably add in with the change that we said we would make to increase the family-friendly housing, the unit count then drops, I think it's to 65.
All within the same envelope and basically the same exterior appearance that you have in front of you. We took a lot of feedback from January and other meetings around that same time that it was looking like a parking garage. And so one of the things we've taken a stride at is looking around Emeryville. Emory Tech does it well. We think we can do it a little bit differently. But to create kind of a simple articulated facade that gets away from the typical proportions of a parking garage. Because the problem with a parking garage, it looks like a parking garage because it's very efficient. So if you take strides to change the proportions of openings and use materials in a way that doesn't look like a parking garage, it's really getting in and changing the proportions. And so that's one of the things we're trying to do. We also felt like more blue sky at the end of Shell Mound was helpful, and so we shifted the staircase. It also helped with the operations of the grocery store. And then it also helps us do kind of a Shell Mound door to the grocery store, the circulation, and the plaza door to the grocery store. And a little bit of that is evident above. I think Arnold's comments on the mechanical enclosure are appropriate. We were being conservative, and we made this extra tall to protect views from the neighboring offices, but we can certainly continue to refine how it presents itself from the street. In terms of what the back looks like in the interim, the objective is to deliver the shell of the grocery store to the grocer in January of 2017, allowing them enough time to fit out the inside. And to commence work on the residential component within 6 months of that. So here they're showing, it's kind of showing a handoff. So you'd effectively go right into construction as soon as you got a temporary C of O on the grocery store. And if that's the case, we feel like there's really no need to dress it up because it's a pretty straightforward build out to frame up a stick residential wrapper. As a backup, and in the event that something goes awry, we thought that beyond a certain window, a temporary scrim, which is basically, we want to find an artist, find a design that's appropriate for this place. We haven't hazarded a guess on what that is yet. But here's a couple of examples of, I'm sure you all remember when the Washington Monument was reclad in construction scrim. This is not it. This is a different building that took the same approach. But there's a lot of flexibility that you have with these construction scrims. And the idea would be that something like this, which is not inexpensive in and of itself, would be a great interim solution to kind of tee up what's coming.
I mean, one of our thoughts is perhaps it could be a mural. Maybe we get an local artist or the school kids or something to help us put that on. But our primary objective is to start the construction of the multifamily as soon as the concrete is finished around the grocery store. But as Aaron said, if for some reason this went on beyond 6 months, we would do some treatment like this. But it's not cheap, and that's why there's an incentive for us to get the multifamily started. Something like this could cost easily $300,000, so we want to move quickly with the housing.
So just the plan in your package is this one, and it, as I mentioned, created a second curb cut, if you will, for deliveries. And it's sort of oversized for the typical delivery truck, but sized for the largest truck to get in and the door to be able to close. We've shown trash, compactors, recycling, and all of those things within this. So when the door is closed, you really have no sense of all of that. As part of this, we created a duplicate driveway, effectively, for the cars. And in doing that, we lost a townhouse. We're hoping to pick it up here, so in a second I'll show you that. Some of the other changes, we got some great feedback from you on employee functions of the grocery store should have windows and really present themselves to the street to activate shell mount. So we've done that, and things from their lockers, their break rooms, those kinds of things are here overlooking the biofiltration treatment area. Other than that, the plan has stayed largely along the lines that we looked at a couple of months ago, with the exception that we've really refined how the unit plans worked and how there's a whole variety of them and how they play together. The plan I showed earlier, let me just flip back and forth, takes the red where the hand is and converts it to a townhouse and a resident amenity room, which, for all intents and purposes, looks like a great coffee shop, but is really a place for residents to hang out and socialize. And we think that really does a great job of bringing residents, right across the street from the park and animating that corner without challenging any of the issues with the grocery store and other tenants in the marketplace. In terms of kind of loading and functionality, the public face of the grocery store, certainly on 62nd Street and Shell Mound, we've created kind of loading zones for customers so they can pull in and pick up, or if you call an Uber, they can, or something like that, they can come and get you here without slowing down traffic. But the bulk of shoppers would come in and park, and if you've used the new Safeway in my neighborhood in Rockridge, it works pretty well. And, it's all the kind of fears of going up and down an elevator with a grocery cart, I think, are sort of non-issues.
Well, the other important thing to point out is that there are close to 3,000 units, or will be, within walking distance of the grocery store. So we think a large percentage of the shoppers will come on foot. And one of the things that our grocer wants to do is hand out little pulley carts to the local residents to make that easier.
Generally, the residential is addressed from the street. The lobby is across from the park. We thought that was an important address, that the lobby of the building beyond the park. There's a secondary lobby because of the length of the building that we thought as a convenience this would help. This lobby also buffers the residential a bit from the train tracks. Typically, it's all ground floor townhouses, and each of those has a stoop and an independent entry. Service, both utility and trucks and so forth, is organized right here at the end of Market Drive. This little mechanical, I just want to point out, is actually the mechanical for the office building across the street that currently lives in a bunker in the middle of the parking lot that needs to get relocated. When that office building was built, they just put it in the parking lot instead of in the building. So we're embedding it here in a new bunker. Going upstairs, so again, this is the double height of the grocery store. It's about a 22-foot ceiling, 23-foot ceiling. You're seeing that townhouse we added, which is 3 bedrooms on the upper floor overlooking the park. Generally, the beige is residential, and these are all the upper floors of townhouses on this level. In section, you kind of get a sense of how it goes. The garage is matched to the residential, so a typical residential floor to floor here might be 10.0, 10.6. Because of our garage, we're at more like 11.6, so the capacity for light to come in through the windows is significantly greater because our windows are that a foot to a foot and a half taller than you might normally get. So that's a convenience so that residents can park on any level and walk, right into their floor, but it has the upside. It also gets the residential building a bit taller to block any views of the parking from Parcel D.
Can you go back to the last slide for a second?
Yeah. Sorry.
What is that sort of blank space? It has a TH3 in it there on the.
TH3 is a unit plan that's not fully resolved. It's townhouse unit 3 that we know fits here, but it has a lot of wonky angles that we just haven't populated into the drawing. Sorry.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. We know it exists. We just haven't figured everything out yet. On the 3rd floor. So again, this is the first parking level. The idea is that shoppers would have come up and arrived here. And this is slightly different from what's in your packet. And again, it's kind of the ongoing conversations of how do you deliver best-in-class grocery, best-in-class residential. And so everyone would arrive here. This floor would be primarily parking for grocery store customers. There would be a ramp up to additional parking. But if you recall in your packet, the ramps are both stacked in this area, and that really presented a challenge for residents to get easily up to their parking level. And so what we've done is reorganize the ramp. It cost us about a dozen parking spaces, but it's made a much more efficient vehicular circulation for residents and a number of office workers who will work across the street and park here. These are all flats, so all apartments. And then there's kind of nominal back of house space.
Would the residential parking be gated separate from the grocery store parking?
It would be. Great segue. So if we go up one level, this would be the 4th floor of the residential building. So residents would come up to this level, and then, again, this is an inefficient parking garage, but a very preferable residential scenario where there'd be gates and a key card access to get up to the roof, which is the residential parking. This floor becomes overflow for the grocery store as well as spaces we can assign to the office building. Again, this is kind of part of managing the parking as a site. Again, it's similar residential flats, but slight tweaks because there's ins and outs and lots of different things that we're doing on the elevations that affect how the units lay out. And so although 1A and 1E have different labels, they're very similar.
So the residential parking would be on the roof?
Yes.
So it would be uncovered?
Correct.
And what about guests of the residents?
We're still thinking through that. Right now, our intent is that the 2nd floor would be for guests as well, and we're looking at whether or not there's a metering solution for the garage as a whole, of which the residential is kind of nested inside of, or whether this is just sort of monitored by people walking around, and so we're still managing, because we're managing the parking on the site as a whole, which is obviously a much bigger enterprise than just one building. And then the upper floor, as was pointed out earlier, there are still setbacks for balconies, and we've done it in ways to give kind of living rooms more privileged views and still kind of recessing back at bedrooms. And then finally, the rooftop level, where there are certainly, well, this is an important point. On the top residential level, we identified a pretty significant space for bike parking as well as mechanical, and we roofed that bike parking. So this big gray blob here is actually bicycle parking, not mechanical. The mechanical's been strung out here and here. It's not a very large building, 65 to 70 units, and so the amount of amenity space, we're trying to right size, and this seemed like the right size and the preferred orientation as opposed to this north leg, and so we've left this north leg as really just a second means of egress, and this would be where we'd focus activity. And we started to envision what it is up there and how it feels, and we think it can be relatively simple and have a profound effect. It's actually a rooftop right near our New York office that we looked down on, so we knew it well. We got a photo, and some other projects that we're pretty familiar with that we think were pretty successful. Without belaboring deliveries and all the various trucks, I think this just highlights again the challenge we're facing with a vehicle that's about this size. So this is a 40-foot trailer. So that's, the big trucks are 53-foot trailers, so we're still well below that. And what it would need to do to get in and dock and then leave afterwards. Again, as Mark said, the acoustical impact of a truck backing up for a handful of seconds it means the rating of the window is a fraction of what the rating of the window needs to be to mitigate sound for the railroad track and still deliver the same level of experience. So we're looking at Emeryville doesn't have a code yet on what that is, but we're looking at a similar rating to some of the neighboring towns here that have rules in place for this. In terms of elevation, it is very similar to where we were in January, especially on the 63rd Street elevation, where it's a mix of plaster, finish, brick, and standing seam metal. One of the comments we received from staff at the last round was that the windows of each type should be a little different, so we've gone to a different window articulation in the metal facade areas as opposed to the more masonry facade areas, and that's similar to these two pictures. We are developing this at all levels, so we're trying to give variety to the building that privileges certain units so that there's a variety to the experience of living here, and it's not just a repetitive sort of same unit stamped out. And so where we can expand a bay, create a terrace, or where we can pull the building back to create a terrace, we've tried to do that. I think, generally we've said 18 inches minimum grade change from townhouse floor plan to street. I think the comment to go to 24 inches is great. Anywhere over 3 to 4 steps starts to be a little bit sort of arduous to bring groceries in and other things. I think maybe my years in a 6th floor walk-up have ruined me, and I think 3 steps sounds terrific, but appreciate that there are trade-offs to privacy living on the ground floor, and so if 24 inches is preferable, that's definitely something we can accommodate. The idea is that we're creating a very residential street in 63rd Street. It ends with the park, and the entire experience here should be about connecting back to that park. The south elevation of the grocery store, this is actually a picture of one of the grocer's stores here on the right. This is a couple of buildings in San Francisco near our office, which we think do a really handsome job of relatively simple plaster with other articulations of steel and the occasional and glass and other metal. We're developing this, again, one of the trademarks of the grocer is a freestanding green roofed canopy. And so in an earlier presentation, this was a canopy hung off the building, and we've moved away from that to do a freestanding canopy over the entry along the 62nd Street area, because it's really one of their signature items, and it has an added benefit of helping us mitigate some stormwater issues. You have a sense of the way we've used metal and different shapes and articulation of structure to mitigate that normal parking garage feel, and we think it's starting to feel like a real building that you can park cars in. And again, the idea is as you come north on Shellmount, it's still very clearly an urban setting. It's very visible grocery store, but you get a little bit more blue sky than we think we had before. The other facades have gotten further development, whether it's the typical back areas like the employee areas of the grocery store, which are now more fully glazed. Even the staircase, the secondary circulation element for the residential has windows, albeit to the train tracks. And then we really like the balance of kind of more brick on 63rd and more plaster on 62nd with elements crossing over between. And so that's why we moved away from the brick here on this corner. I'm not going to belabor streetscape, but we've definitely it's not overly generous, but we think there's enough space there for residents to have a little planting area of their own, as well as the enhanced kind of streetscape planning that we'll be doing. So again, in the event that the residential building is not immediately green lighted, the idea would be to put the curb in place so that it feels finished on 63rd Street, and that we would then kind of break through the curb. So there'd be on-street parking right away, and then we break through the curb, do some temporary parking up against the back of the garage, and then we would cover the delivery area in the interim until the residential building can be built around it. And so these are crude. We didn't want to get into what the mural might be, but everything hatched would be under the mural, and you can see the doors to the loading areas are already in place, and here they are built out. So the intention is to conceal all the things that are meant to be concealed right up front, and then cloak this thing in a very fun, whimsical, appropriate kind of scrim, and we'd expect to come back and review that as part of our larger signage package anyway.
But the intent is to start the residential as soon as the retail's finished. That's what our plan is. This would be a backup plan if for some reason the economy fell apart.
Just a little bit on Unimix. So I think the package you have is the top mix, which has a mix of studios, 1s, 2s, and 3s, and that's around 38% family friendly, if we say that family friendly units are 2 and 3 bedrooms. The version I presented today, which had that additional 3-bedroom townhouse, is substantially the same, 38, 39%. Those family-friendly units tend to be more park-facing. The mix is, again, so the ground floors are pinkish because they're townhouses. The upper floors are bluish because there's flats. We've used corners for 3 bedrooms. We've found spaces for 3 bedrooms where we can. And then the update that is sort of fresh off the press is that we could go to 65 units instead of 69, or actually 70 in the last one. And in doing that, we would convert a number of 2 bedrooms, especially park-facing 2 bedrooms, 1 bedrooms to 2 bedrooms. And so we could bump the overall mix of family-friendly to something like 57% by ratcheting down the overall unit count. And we think, this does make a lot of sense for this site in particular because of its relationship to the park. And so in doing that, we've now got an additional, we're up to 5 3-bedrooms and a number of 2 bedrooms. But it becomes a building that's much more about families than it is about singles or young couples. That said, we still think studios, which are shown closest to the train tracks, and 1 bedrooms are helpful to create an overall balance as a project. And I think the market comps, certainly around town as well as around the Bay Area, support that. There's a lot of unit types. So this is the unit types in the building. And I think you pointed out, Commissioner Moss, that there's one missing. But it's not easy to make a building look interesting from the outside if you use all the same units. So we've explored a number of ways to change, and each floor has a different. So these tend to be townhouses here along the bottom. So even though that townhouses all look similar, there's actually 5 types of townhouses. There's a number of different 2-bedroom and 3-bedroom plans depending on what floor you are in the building to take advantage of different site conditions. And then there's a series of studios and 1-bedroom plans. We certainly looked more seriously at a lot of the comments. We had always anticipated some sort of covered entry, but now articulating a little glass and metal canopy over each townhouse stoop so that you do have a dry place to take your keys out of your pocket and come in the front door. We're certainly exploring different ways to manage how the stairs and the elevation change works. Within the unit themselves, we've really looked seriously at how do you create those kind of nooks for studying, for TV watching. One of the things we've done in these townhouses is eliminated the corridor on the 2nd floor, so the townhouses are extra deep on the 2nd floor, which creates this great little study alcove or TV room or whatever you have, which again, it's that second space. So you can have friends over on the ground floor and your kids can be upstairs watching TV, but not in their rooms. And we think those second spaces are pretty valuable. Again, subsequent to some of Arnold's comments and kind of always going on concurrently, we have our interior designer who's gone to work on furnishing all of our plans. And so these are sort of, we haven't moved the walls, but it's another level of refinement of how people live in these spaces. And you start to see, with really ample seating groups, that these are very generous apartments. And the kind of room that you have for strollers and other things that are just facts of life as a young family are accommodated here. So in this case, the ground floor is really kind of more formal living. The upstairs has more of, in addition to kind of the 2nd bathroom and the laundry room, which has even a counter space in it, it has a full den off of so in this case, this is a master and a secondary bedroom. There are iterations. So on the end, this is on the 63rd Street. We have an opportunity where the townhouse abuts 63rd Street. So we flipped the plan and created more of a bay window with a staircase. Again, so you've got more light, more air, and that changes the unit plan upstairs. We have now 2 conditions with a 3-bedroom townhouse where it's, again, very similar living plan on the ground floor, but 3 bedrooms upstairs, and again with the sort of family den. And just as a kind of refresher, these, as you get into the world of flats, these tend to be always facing the park. The subsequent revision we made was to take these 2 1-bedrooms and make them a 2-bedroom and a 2-bedroom here and another couple of 2-bedrooms here. And so it's, it's like, how do you translate all those great family amenities to a flat, which doesn't always give you that luxury because it's all about how much frontage you have. But by locating a 3-bedroom on a corner, we're able to maximize. So here's a kitchen, living, dining with windows facing 2 directions. All of the bedrooms kind of stacked off of each other and efficient and sort of away from the public space approach. Here's a 2-bedroom, much the same way, where you come into a kitchen, living, dining, and the bedrooms are off to the side. So you can entertain without people feeling like they're walking through your bedroom. Refining furniture plans for unique conditions. Again, we're trying to understand where we have a bay on a floor, we can have a living room kind of pop out versus where we don't. And so it's just as the floor plans react to the buildings. Upper floors with great covered terrace versus lower floors that get just a little bit more interior space. Just versions of 2 bedrooms, all of which are applying the same principles that we think are working really well. So without kind of belaboring all that, I just kind of want to come back to the schedule and to say that, our hope is to really get into the ground on the street later this year, and then to go full blast on the grocery store at the start of next year so that we can hand it off and follow quickly after with the residential. Meanwhile, there's other projects on your docket, whether it's Parcel A or Parcel D, and the hope is that all of these are into construction sooner than later. So thanks.
All right, questions for the applicant?
Do you have any knowledge of any soil problems on this site?
Yeah, the site sits within a deed restriction, as does the road. And we have a pretty open dialogue with DTSC and have been working through the implications of putting these uses on this site. It was always anticipated in the PDP, and you know, it's an ongoing process, whether it's the park or parcel A or parcel B. So a big reason this is an all above grade scheme is that going down is expensive and challenging, which Essex certainly figured out the hard way.
Mm-hmm. Where are you in the process of the traffic study?
We have delivered everything, and I believe they're working.
We should be getting the first draft of the traffic study on Monday. I see that we are still working on the circulation itself, so, you know, probably all that will have to be sorted out before the project comes for any kind of approvals.
That include the delivery issues?
Yes, so we are constantly getting the updated information, so, you know, we'll make sure that the most, you know, as much information that they can give us, that will be examined.
This delivery option is with them. The only change that they wouldn't have seen was the upper floor parking circulation, so.
And Meru, the traffic study is for, does it take into account the entire development and proposed or projected truck trips for the retail areas, the other parcels?
Right, so the traffic study is also being done for parcels A and D.
Okay.
And it's the same consultant, obviously Fair and Pierce is doing that. So they will be taking into consideration the whole project and not just parcel C. Yeah.
And they looked at this about a year ago when we first came back. So this is really just an update to the report they've already done.
No.
Just to clarify that, the study they're doing now is just for parcel C and B, I believe, right? It takes into account the other parcels, but it's not a study of the entire Marketplace PUD. We're doing separate traffic studies for parcel A and for parcel D, which also will take into account the other parcels.
Okay, then that leads me to another question then for, find my parcels. So the parcels that have retail, have you received information on truck trips for those spaces, or at least a projection of what kind of truck trips you'll have for deliveries for the retail spaces?
I don't believe we have. Not for retail space for B.
What we're assuming is that that's typical. These are small format retail, 1,500 feet, 2,000 feet, and then we've called out essentially 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 6 restaurants. And so when we gave that information to the traffic consultant, and we ran our own traffic consultant, so they have that mix.
Okay, thank you.
But just, you know, to clarify, March of last year, Fair and Pierce issued a report on all of these same land uses with, the only difference was that 200 parking spots that are now shown on C were formerly shown on B. So
Yeah,
they're studying the same thing over. It's just a refinement to get the nuances. And they've given us a lot of feedback already, like, you know, adjust this curb to accommodate the FedEx truck to deliver to the residential.
Right.
So it's, you're seeing the benefit of a lot of that, and there's certainly a refinement coming.
Right, and what's triggering my question is that you, for the grocery store, you have this delivery schedule throughout the day, and that's really, really helpful information, and I think the more of that type of information we can get for the other spaces, the more accurate your study will end up being.
There's sort of a general expectation in terms of what restaurants and retails deliver. We've not leased any of the space, so we're not going to be able to till it's built, but there's a general delivery schedule. Most of the smaller spaces will have FedEx and UPS, and we're parcel B, they'll all be loaded from the back. You know, so it won't be street. We've got a loading access for that, so we're dealing with that. The loading for the existing retail happens along actually Marketplace, the back there. So the consultants deal with that, and I think they understand the typical delivery patterns for this type of retail and restaurant use.
So this is a study session for the FDP for parcel C and Shell Mound.
Correct. So parcel C and the realignment of the street.
And by the realignment of the street, I mean, I saw there's a bunch of drawings in the back that sort of get into Shell Mound striping and bike lanes, and all of that's part of this. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Now, what about the plaza, what's been called the plaza, the area between the public market and parcel C? Is that part of this?
It is part of this FDP, correct.
To that end, I mean, we're in the weeds with Maurice Kaufman and others about the details of the street. So.
And we didn't go into detail tonight because we've presented it several times before and it hasn't really changed. And we've incorporated your comments, but we're welcome to hear and answer any questions you might have.
Thank you.
So I would point out also, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe this FDP also includes Market Drive between the park and Parcel C, as well as 63rd Street from Shell Mound to the park.
Yes.
Right.
So essentially, it's the same as you saw in the January study session, except for the garage. That is parcel B.
I'm not going to show you this. It's in red.
The schedule of the garage now comes after building F, is that right?
Right, what is phase 1 of parcel B and phase 2?
In order to manage the parking, because
Parcel A,
we're a challenge site, so we're going to build a garage in 2 phases. We're going to build the north half of the Parcel B garage in the first phase, and then that'll create parking reservoir, and then the second phase will be built immediately thereafter.
But you'll be doing away with the existing parking lot for Parcel A before the garage building is completed?
That's right.
Won't that
But
create-
we've managed the parking, and we can share that with you. We have a study. We've Nelson Nygaard, who you're familiar with, and they've made presentations to you with regard to this project. We had them carefully study the parking phasing, and we have a phasing plan that we can share with you.
Earlier, you had been talking about the park going in as the first phase. Why did it get bumped?
That's that wonderful thing, parking again. So we need the parking on the expansion area until we complete the other spaces above the grocery store.
I'm struggling a little bit to picture the trellis with the green roof in front of the grocery store. Do you have any? I couldn't find it on any of the renderings or anything like that. Or do you have an image of similar anything?
Yes, and it had a big sign that called out the name of the grocer, so I took it out of the presentation. Let me. Yes.
It's basically just sort of grass is what it is.
Yeah, it's a painted black steel trellis, not unlike some of the awning pictures we've shown. Sorry, not trellis, not the right word. It has a roof, and it's I'm trying to get to an image. Really. Yeah, so it looks like this from the side, where you have a C channel that kind of runs around the outside of it. It has a series of steel posts, and then it has kind of a grassy planting on top that we're hoping we can, which is how they've done it before. We're hoping we can improve on that and introduce some color.
Okay.
But
And it looked like, from what I saw, that there would be awnings underneath it. Is that correct?
well, the idea is that on this side of the street, it would be this covering the entrance, and then as it turned the corner on the Shellman elevation would have awnings suspended off the building.
Oh, okay.
So they'd have a similar detailing, but happen in different places.
Okay. You mentioned that the grocery store was not keen on the idea of a cafe next door to them. I noticed that on the plans that space was labeled as retail. Is that, were they also not keen on
No,
retail?
the problem is that space doesn't really work as retail, because if you look at the plan, it's divorced from the rest of the project, and sort of the retail energy happens along Shell Mound, and this is off by itself. And it wouldn't work. It would be an empty, vacant space. So the only possible use would be a restaurant use, or a quick grab-and-go kind of food or coffee use. Coffee doesn't work because we've already got an exclusive with Pete's, so we can't bring in another coffee user. And we were concerned about this being a space that would just not be utilized, wouldn't be leased. And then the grocery store has an issue with regard to food, because they're planning to have, within their store, they have presentation where they create different food products to go and eat and take away. And they didn't want to be competing against somebody right next door to them. And they're also concerned about the parking that might demand from a restaurant, and it would take away from the parking that they have. They're already going with an urban-oriented parking count. And this was something that was very important. And we've talked to them about this issue many, many times, and it's something that they have not wavered upon.
So on the grocery store floor plan, at the front of the store, there's a little dashed-in box that says purveyors. What type of use would that be?
Yeah, so each of their stores is a little different, and it's sort of tuned to the neighborhood that it's in. But the consistent ingredients that they've talked to us about are a bakery, so they do bake on site. They have a kind of a funky coffee breakfasty place that tends to be in the front, or in all their stores. It always has a glassy seating area. It's pretty cool. And then they have a line where you can get sort of Mexican food or Asian food, and they'll cook to order. And so it's kind of like Mi Pueblo meets Whole Foods. But anyway, so when we say purveyors, the idea is to, sometimes those get buried in the back of a store. We want to pull that to the street and really have that participate in what's going on in the marketplace already.
Cool, thanks. And then I have a couple more questions. So the amenities for the deck area for the residential, I was wondering if you could describe those a little bit better. I was kind of struggling to figure out how some of them would function. In particular, the what's labeled as covered outdoor kitchen and barbecue seemed, I counted like 22 seats at it, so it seemed rather, I mean, you could use it for a large gathering, but it seemed like maybe it would be more well utilized if it was broken up into two smaller barbecue areas or something like that. So I was curious how you envision that being used.
That's a great comment. Yeah, our experience is that they are really popular with birthday parties for kids of all ages, and grown-ups too. But I think your comment on scale is a good one, and we could certainly balance that. I don't think there was, we were sort of drawing something that felt pretty good in terms of picking up the space, and it got to be 22 seats, and we probably didn't step back and think about that enough. But at any rate, the idea was to zone the plan in a way that you had a kind of more adulty area with a more sort of family area, and then kind of kids of all ages area. But these things get colonized all different ways.
I was also a little concerned perhaps about especially if we're going to be increasing the number of larger bedroom, units with more bedrooms and larger units with the goal of having more families in this location. I was a little bit concerned about the fire table and whether that might, was safe for children, or, I've never seen one of those in this kind of environment, so.
Great question. I'm just thinking about my son right now. I don't know. I mean, they do have that little glass wall around them, but.
Oh, okay. I've never seen one, so I don't know what.
It's a fire pit. It's like a designer fire pit, really.
Okay. And then my last question is actually the same question that I asked the design consultant. I was wondering if you could address that. If the redundant corridor access was deleted from the ground floor units, how do you view the access requirement, and how would you comply with that?
the collective experience of the architects working on the project, so parcels A and D and us, is that Fair Housing Act, as soon as you go to a building of this type, they look at accessibility to all units. So even though 10% is the normal rule, they end up knocking you for all of them. And so the prudent thing to do is provide that as a matter of course, and then design to invite people in the front door off the street. But that's, believe us, it's an added cost for sure. And it does have the benefit of being able to take the garbage out and other things.
But it sounds like then you're looking at it from an accessibility from a guest standpoint, because in the townhome units, all the bedrooms are upstairs, right? So they're not accessible for a resident.
Right, but even the ground floor powder room is sized to an ADA bathroom, which is significantly bigger than. Let me just get it off the hook. So, this is a powder room, accommodates a wheelchair that you certainly wouldn't need to design to. In fact, as a matter of course, we're, as a group of architects, designing all of these to those standards, so all of our bathrooms tend to be more gracious than you would kind of otherwise do in a standalone townhouse, simply because they're in a building with flats, and the implication is that you'd be held to the same standard.
So are you doing universal design on most of these units?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's all these different words. We just sort of designed so that all those things could accommodate. So in earlier versions of the plan, you'll see a bunch of dashed rectangles that represent all of those kinds of dimensions. They didn't make it to this version.
Any other questions for the applicant?
Yeah, in looking at this delivery schedule, there are areas where it looks like there would be potentially 2 or 3 of the large trucks that need to use the bay, and then there's another category for using the bay if it's available. What is the potential for stacking of these trucks? What is the situation where somebody's using the bay and someone else is going to be trying to get there?
Where do they stack?
Yeah.
Well, the way that
How do
you
you
manage that, and the way we've managed it in the rest of our projects, is you have a dock master or somebody who coordinates the deliveries, and certain vendors are only allowed to come at a certain time, and if they come late, they're waived off. And so you coordinate those deliveries so you don't have that issue, and that's the way we've dealt with it in our projects.
But I mean, as a designer, we toured all these projects and scratched our heads and said, how do you do it? They've never provided more than one, and they realize it's an issue because they're in urban sites. And so the dock manager actually manages to a much finer grain than that schedule would imply. So I think, obviously before they open, that similar schedule will be built here and it'd be much more thought through. But I think the idea is the understanding is there's no room to park a truck in the middle of this project and have it loiter in that way. So whether there are underutilized streets down the road, or they just stage their deliveries differently, I think it's a heavily managed operation.
The other thing is that it's the incentive for the delivery folks to be in and out in a short time frame, because it's time's money for them. So they want to make sure they hit the windows they're allowed as well, because they want to get in and get out. They don't want to spend an extra hour there.
Well, you do have one commercial loading strip on the street.
Yes, we have commercial loading here. In addition to this bay, the compactor is only at the end, so we have additional room here for pickup trucks and vans. Everything is a little oversized, so we think we've got room to accommodate this. And based on their other stores, of which they have several dozen, and never provided this nice of a serviced area, they're really excited.
I would say we have 3 times the available loading area than they use in their other stores.
At least.
Mm-hmm. And the residential loading that's shown on 63rd Street, that's going to be restricted to residents, or will it also serve commercial loading?
In terms of, this is sort of move-in area, and this would be pickup drop-off, and so we would stripe that short-term loading, unloading.
Any other questions?
Chair Moss?
Yes.
I had a question for the applicant. As you were considering alternate uses for that corner retail, did you consider childcare as a possible use for that corner?
We have not considered that.
Would you?
I mean, it's everything. We take a look at it, but we made everything boils down to making the project viable, and we made a major move to increase the number of 3 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms, which makes the project less viable. And we're dealing with some other, we mentioned before, the skin costs around the parking and such. So I can tell you that the parking just to clad that is costing us almost 30% more than we'd pay for a normal clad parking structure. So there's just certain elements what's the most important components to have in this project?
Since you mentioned the cladding of the garage, I think it was parcel B, there was a garage and there was cladding there that we looked at a while ago in another study session, and I remember the feedback being pretty positive from the Planning Commission on the design that you did there. So I'm wondering if you looked back towards that design to see about incorporating that into this. I see some
I wish you'd been
looks
here in
on your
January.
faces, so and how does the cost compare to what you're planning for the other parcel that we liked?
I think the consensus in January was that we have a lot of work to do on that garage skin, and our research points to there's sort of a bare minimum cost to do anything, and it's pretty significant. And so the more you enhance, the more expensive it gets. So we are looking at ways to maximize the appearance. And so we're using all that research. We're thinking about it. We think this approach is a good one, and it reflects some things that have been done around town pretty successfully, and we think it builds on and improves those. In terms of what it actually costs, it's significant. I mean, over at like the Chiron building, that's obviously a very straightforward way to go. And some of the buildings at Mission Bay are obviously very elaborate, but have the benefit of a very large institution. So.
Yeah, the other thing too is that the design that we chose for parcel C, we feel matches the aesthetic we're looking for, more of an industrial look with the windows and such. And B, in some ways maybe is a little too flashy, or it's just it attracts too much attention. We want the eyes to be on the retail, and the above just kind of disappear, and that's really what we're trying to go for. And we have to come back to you with parcel B, and the benefit of what we're learning with C will hopefully manifest itself in how we come back to for B.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions? Great. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
All right, so with that, we will open the public comment period for this item. So if anyone would like to speak, please come forward.
Before my time comes, can you turn on the overhead? Very good, thank you. Good evening, Chair Moss and Commissioners. As I've talked to neighbors in my community and my building at Pacific Park Plaza, I'm Stephen Keller, a resident at Pacific Park Plaza, and other residences in Christie Commons, we really like this project, and we would really like to see it move forward as quickly as possible. But I still have some serious issues with loading dock on the north side of the building. In the same PUD, we have buses traveling down Shellmount Street and stopping traffic throughout the entire day, in both directions, and somehow that's not a traffic problem. But delivery trucks entering a dock at 6 in the morning when traffic is minimal is somehow more serious. The thing about the sound attenuation that they're talking about, the insulation, is many of us, as you know, living in the Bay Area, sleep with our windows open. Once you open a window to your unit, you've completely nullified any insulation that's been created, so that becomes a moot point. So anyone with their windows open at 3 in the morning when these deliveries starts are going to be woken up in the morning, and they won't be able to go back to sleep. So this is a drawing that was done by an architect that lives at Christie Commons, Rod Heim, and he shows a drive-through delivery. So entering the parking structure in the same location, trucks can pull in, they back up within the building so they don't create any bother to the neighbors, and then they exit the front of the building towards Christie Park and then exit out Market Street, and then they could exit out to that way. Rod said that he had given this to the developers and as well as city staff, so I'm a little disappointed that it hadn't been brought up yet tonight, but I think this is a very good option and something that should be considered. So in different subjects, I'm thankfully there's been this third consideration for the parking. In addition, architectural styles of the townhouse, I think, are a modern interpretation of the industrial style and provide a good transition between the original brick warehouse and the existing office tower. And I think it's a very good plan, and I like the interpretation. I think the windows, being the great size that they are, make great connections to the surrounding area. And someone who probably will spend the rest of his life looking at this project out my window, I really rather like it. But I definitely do think we need to see the return of the brick on that corner that they had taken away. I think that really kind of made the project a little cheaper. And lastly, as for the temporary installation on the north and south sides of the grocery store, I was thinking maybe that there could be more of a permanent solution in nature that can reside on this parking structure temporarily and then become part of a more permanent covering on the east side of the parking structure for the garage on parcel B that faces the railroad track. So they could do something here on this garage that could then be transferred over to the other parcel and become something more permanent. But those are my comments. Thank you very much.
Perfect timing.
Yeah.
Any other speakers? All right, seeing none, we'll close the public comment and we'll bring this back to the commission for discussion. Commissioner Gunkel, do you want to kick us off?
Sure.
Oh, actually,
Go ahead.
sorry. I want to. I just want to kind of make a comment about procedural items before we get started. So I think that I think we've heard a lot of discussion already about unit mix. And we've heard some of the applicants' thoughts on that. I think that they are looking for some really clear direction for us, so I would just encourage the commission to try to give them that direction. I just want to be clear that at this time, we don't have a policy or a regulation related to unit mix, and I don't want while the staff may be in the process of embarking on the road of drafting some draft policies, and our comments might inform that. I just didn't want anything that we said tonight to be construed as any sort of policy on that. So I just wanted to make that comment, but go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, I commend you guys on the progress you've been making. As I looked through the drawings, I started kind of accumulating a list of some comments, and then I have to admit, I looked through the drawings first, and then I read the staff report, and I saw that a lot of what I had been thinking had actually already been covered by Arnold, which is great. And so I would say in our staff report, items 1 through 5 that Arnold listed are all ones that I agree with in some way. I liked the curve at the corner, and I liked the penthouse popping up at that curve. I felt like that really kind of, I felt like that could have gone further, sort of like make it kind of more of a sort of a centerpiece of that transition right there, and instead it sort of went the other way, which was to remove the penthouse or pull the penthouse to the side and remove the curve. And so I would encourage you to kind of go back to where you were before and maybe take it a step further. And I agree on item number 2, relocating the mechanical room somewhere so that it doesn't distract from that corner. I agree with 3, returning the brick facade on the southwest corner. 4, using smooth textured plaster. And then 5, the use of metal windows, or if your intention is to use different windows at different areas where the walls are finished differently, to kind of show us what that is. I would assume that the areas that are brick, where you have the more factory, kind of factory appearance, or lending, taking the style from a sort of a more industrial building, that you'd use metal, aluminum, windows there. And if you were going to use vinyl, that maybe that would be in the other areas where you showed the white vinyl sample. Item number 6, I don't know if that's the most important thing to me, the extending the planter along the north side of the roof. Item number 7, and I on Doyle Street, I run past a place that has the stoops at least 30 inches above the, above the sidewalk, and their blinds are always closed. And honestly, I think this gets to the heart of, when so often nowadays we put the living, it used to be that we had the kitchens always at the front. Then for, more recently, everyone's switching, and, for quite a while now, the living rooms are at the front of the houses, they're the units. And the reality is, when people are in the living room, it's a more private space. People don't necessarily want to be seen sitting there in their boxers watching television, whereas if they're in the kitchen standing up at a sink looking out the window, their eyes are on the street, they're less concerned about being seen themselves. And so I think that is pretty much at the heart of what causes people to have their blinds closed, whether or not they're 30 or 18 inches above sidewalk level. And frankly, I think it often feels kind of strange and forced when we do raise them up too high and have them 30 inches above sidewalk level. In addition to those comments, I would like to see what the temporary screen is. As much as I appreciate the fact that the schedule shows the housing construction starting immediately after the grocery store is occupied, I think there still lies a possibility that we could see the back of this for years. And maybe it could be built into as a condition of approval that if the housing construction hasn't started, say 6 months after the certificate of occupancy for the grocery store, then this screen would have to be installed. But I'd like to see what that screen is, and I'd like for us to be able to approve it before then. I appreciate the alternative unit count that you proposed, that sort of increases the numbers of 2s and 3s. I guess I'd still love to see it increased even more, but I definitely appreciate the direction that you're going. I didn't notice it in your slideshow, but definitely in the drawings that we were provided, unit plan 2A was kind of what we've been trying to move away from, where you've got 2 bedrooms with 2 bathrooms, and they're each sort of on opposite sides of the living area, creating kind of a optimal environment for 2 non-related adults to occupy the space in more of a dormitory style setting. I would like to, being that the plaza is part of this component that we're looking at, I'd like to see that fleshed out more. I'd like to see, I think Planning Commission seems, or at least a lot of us seem to keep bringing this up and viewing this plaza as this public plaza, the pavers, and very rarely occupied by motor vehicles. And I want to kind of get to feel what you're looking at it as, and how that works. Is the entire thing raised, and then the transition into the park is raised with that table? I know that's sort of what you're showing, but just to get a feel for what that plaza is like. On Shellmount, I'm still seeing that one crosswalk by parcel A, not at the grand stair to the, up to the bridge, but instead further to the south, which doesn't make sense to me, and I'd like to see it at the grand stair. Let's see here. Yeah, I did like the idea of the cafe at the park, actually. I understand the dilemma. Right now, I feel like this small club room at the park is kind of a throwaway space that might occasionally get utilized by the residents. And so I'd like to see some studies and thought go into, if it's not going to be a cafe or retail space, how to really activate that space. I think that's all my comments for now.
I'm also very pleased with the way things are moving along. I think you have been listening a lot to the comments that you've been getting, and I do also agree with pretty much all of the recommendations on the building design from the consultant. I think one of the ways of dealing with privacy from the street level, I don't think it needs to be raised a huge amount. 18 inches is probably a little bit short, but considering some other kind of translucent glazing on the lower parts of the windows so that there's functional privacy from eye level from the sidewalk would be helpful. I would love to see something done on the roofs so they're not just raised parking lots that people are looking down from other residential areas, from offices, or from anything that's taller. Whether it's solar panels or some kind of trellis system or some kind of green roof systems on top of that, I think we need to do something more than just have parking and lighting up there. Solar or green are both good. I also do prefer the presence of the grocery store with the curved entry and with the entry on Shell Mound. I think that when you come in that angle and when the street is bending, that it is much more, it feels much more like a place to have that facade wrapping around a little bit better. I'm hoping that the Farron Pierce report will really look at the transitions on the cycle track on Shell Mound, where it's going from being outside, the possibility of it being a protected cycle track, and where it's going in at the bus stops. Those kind of transitions I think are really tricky, and they're concerning me, so I would like to see a little bit more analysis of that. And I thought that the drive-through loading bay was a really interesting idea, and I know it takes away from ground floor uses, but in a dense area like this, the idea of the beepers and not being able to open your windows at night is really, it is concerning. And I know that there are people up the street across San Pablo that are now grappling with a business that has deliveries starting at 3:30 and 4:30 in the morning, and they're in front of the Oakland Planning Commission, I think, right now, arguing about that one, because it's really disturbing to people in the morning to have those kind of early deliveries. I like the way that you're articulating the surroundings for the parking. I think that it looks much better with the divided frontages than it did with the horizontal kind of screening on it. I like the way that that's working. And if the brick wraps around, I think that the materials that you're using are really getting richer, and that it's giving a nice look. I'm not so crazy about the metal facades on it, but maybe if I see more detail of that. It is really important to see what that transition is from the marketplace alleyway to the plaza. I think that that's a really, really primary part of the entire project, and we need to see the detail on that. And I'm glad to see that you're adding more of the larger units. I think that that's the right direction to go. That's what I have for now.
Okay. I too agree that the project is really really fleshing out in a nice way. Just to add to some comments, hopefully that haven't been said before, the unit mix, I definitely think it's a great idea to go from the 38% or whatever it was before to the 57% of family-friendly housing. The only comment I would have there is that there be more 3 bedrooms as opposed to, quite a bit more 2 bedrooms, which is what you're showing now. For the clubhouse resident amenity space, I think it'd be a good idea to consider another resident amenity such as a workout room. It may get more use than just, an occasional rental of the clubhouse. Yeah, I wanted to touch a little bit more on what Commissioner Gunkel said about the activating the sidewalk space where these townhomes are and how we see the curtains drawn so much. And I think, and we talked about this at our last meeting on another project, and we talked about orienting the kitchens more towards the outside so that would keep people from drawing their shades. So I just want to reiterate that we should consider that, and that's something that you may want to consider. Maybe not necessarily for every unit, but for some of them, and just maybe experiment with that. It may just be the solution that we've been looking for. For the parking lot, so I was concerned that the residents don't have covered parking, and so I think that it's going to be important for you to look into that and consider providing some covered parking. Also, up on the roof, you're going to have, a lot of heat gain there. So in the material there, definitely look into something that's cool, like a cool pavement. Emerald Cities is working with Lawrence Berkeley Lab to develop and promote their product. They've used it, and they've shown that it reduces the need for parking lot lighting by 30%. So that's something that I think you should look into so that the residents that are parking up there won't be so exposed. So maybe a combination of covered spaces as well as not having, very heat absorbent parking lot material. And then as far as the design, I think that it's definitely coming along. I think that the southwest corner, and I'm repeating what other commissioners have said so far, should retain that brick facade. I think that really will really keep the project quality on the upside. And unit mix. I had one more item, but I think I'll come back to it. It's not coming to me right now.
Well, I agree with most of the comments I've heard from my fellow commissioners. I do think a curve at the front entrance would be good. Where the club room is located, which used to be retail space, I think that might just as well be another townhouse unit. Could be a large one. And at this date, it may be difficult to do, but I think the townhouse is located on 63rd Street. That space might be better assigned to the grocery store, and at least on the first 2 floors. And then deliveries could be made right off the street in front of them. And it would just, the townhouses on that narrow street are more likely to have their curtains pulled because there's nothing to look out at except the street and the building across the street from it. And whereas the townhouses on the west side do overlook the park and on a less traffic street. So that would be one of my suggestions. The other thing is I do think the tenant parking should be on a covered floor. The customers for the grocery store are in and out, and so being in an uncovered location is more acceptable to them. And I do think it still could be covered by a trellis or something, but that it's open to the weather for the residents of the building. So, my comment.
I also agree with a lot of the comments that have been expressed already. I want to thank the applicant for kind of the direction you're going with this. I think you have put a lot of hard work into it and really taken most of our comments to heart, and it's really encouraging to see that. I'll start with a couple of easy comments. I think there needs to be cart storage for the grocery store on all of the levels of the garage that will have grocery store parking. I noticed it shown on the first level, but not on the second, and I don't think people will be willing to take a cart down a level when they're done with it. And then, in addition, I don't think you have any, but I want to make sure that there's not any outdoor cart storage planned. And I would just really encourage you to work with your grocery operator to make sure that all of their different carts have been planned for. I worked on a Safeway project where there was plenty of cart storage area that was designed into the project, but then lo and behold, when they started operating the store, they had all these weird oversized carts for kids and all kinds of things that didn't fit in the cart storage areas, and they ended up in the bike racks and all kinds of places. So that's my comment on that. I want to talk for a minute about the streets surrounding the project, particularly Market Drive and 62nd Street. I share Commissioner Gunkel's desire to see how 62nd Street will function as a plaza. I really am very eager to retain its ability to do so. To me, it seems like a very redundant street. So if it's needed for emergency vehicle access, then by all means, we can provide that. But if it doesn't need to serve passenger vehicles, then I don't see the need for it to do so. And to that extent, I think that the one-way, actually 62nd Street, I would like to see the one-way reversed and have Market Drive, then one-way, all of, one-way heading, what direction is that? Toward 63rd. For the entire length. What I'm trying to do there is that right now, if you turn onto Market Drive from 63rd, you're then forced onto 62nd because it becomes a one-way street. So I don't want to have vehicles that are forced to use 62nd because it just becomes more difficult to block off 62nd for temporary events or things like that. You would then have to block off Market Drive, or at least a portion of it as well. So I think by reversing the one-ways, it would serve the project better. Or alternately, I think you could reverse my one-way proposal on Market Drive simply by restriping the angled parking that is down on the private portion of it in front of the existing marketplace. You could reverse that and maybe play with that as well. So I just encourage you to revise that. And then as far as the loading dock, I was really encouraged to see the drawing that Commissioner Keller, Mr. Keller put up on the overhead. I do feel, I know you've explored a lot of options, but I feel like maybe we haven't seen them, because I just, when we keep looking at options for the loading deck, I can't help but think that there are other options that haven't been explored. And one thing that I keep thinking of is, for example, and I realize this might increase the frontage of the loading dock, so there are trade-offs. But have you looked at angling the loading dock to limit the distance that trucks would have to back up, and maybe they wouldn't have to make a kind of a 3-point T-shaped turn, they could just pull past the loading dock and then back up into an angled loading dock. So, you know, just as an example, that's something I would like to see you explore. The proposal that was shown on the overhead, that may or may not be the answer too, but I just feel like there's something better out there. This is, you know, this is a good start, and it's definitely better than the original proposal. I think, you know, we're gradually getting there, but I would like to see some additional options as well. I also agree with the Commissioner Donaldson's comment about covering the rooftop parking. I made a note, my note says rooftop PV. I think that's a great opportunity for that. You could, you know, provide a significant amount of the energy for the grocery store by doing that, and cover the parking at the same time. So it seems like very much a win-win. And I agree with most of the design consultants' comments, especially related to that corner of the building that's been brought up before. I think that there needs to be an emphasis on that corner. It is what you're going to see when you're coming down Shell Mound, whether you're driving or walking. It doesn't need to be something as dramatic as a tower feature or anything, but I think there does need to be sort of an emphasis and a focus on that corner of the building. In my opinion, it would be a fabulous place for a blade sign that advertised the grocery store, but that's something you can look at or not. And then also, I very much agree with the comment, the suggestions about the trellis from the design consultant. I think that the trellises that we saw in January were much more sophisticated than that which have been shown on these plans. They looked like maybe they were metal trellises or something that was intended to mimic that, and these trellises on these plans look very much more basic than that, and so I would like to see that sophistication brought back to the trellises. And I think as I think Commissioner Tan said, the brick facade on that corner by the park, I think, is also important. It really provides warmth. I think that's a very important corner for the building, and just without a significant amount of that brick, the other colors of the building start to look drab, and so I think it needs that warmth. That warmth of the brick really enhances the other materials. With that, I think my last comment is about unit mix. So I will just say that I was kind of thinking of two options to improve the unit mix from what was in our packet, and I'm happy to say that one of my ideas is basically what you presented, so that was good. I was going to suggest basically that the ratio be flipped instead of 60-40, 40-60. And that's basically what you've done with the 57%. By adding, if you could squeeze in 2 more, you could get to 60%, which I think looks better on paper. But I really appreciate your efforts to increase the mix as you have. The other option is so I do have a question for the applicant. Do you now have a development partner to build this residential component?
We do not. We are talking to a development partner, but we've not finalized anything yet.
Okay.
But we're hoping to do so.
Okay, thanks. My other idea was actually to look at this project as part of the whole marketplace project. And the goal really is to increase the mix of larger bedroom units on that scale of the whole project. And I thought it might actually be to your benefit and provide some flexibility to bank some of those larger units here to, perhaps free up the mix that we might want to see on other parcels. What I mean by that is perhaps there's an opportunity to make this parcel C, essentially 100% 2 and 3 bedroom units with a development partner that builds that product type. I mean, it definitely is a product type that exists. And, whoops, what happened to our screens? And I think by doing that, I'm not trying to segregate different populations or different uses, but I think in as much as you can kind of cluster them, it provides some opportunities. For example, even though we have the park across the street, and that provide, that's going to provide a playground and some recreational opportunities for families and young children and children of all ages. If this site were to accommodate all 2 and 3 bedroom units, then perhaps the outdoor amenities could have more of an emphasis on families and all ages. And there might, the child care that was brought up by the staff might then be a perfect fit for this building and other sort of components like that. Like I said, I think we're looking at overall unit mix, so we don't want to give up on this goal of having a high amount of units that could accommodate families. But if this site, took the majority of that, then, as I said, it might free up other parcels to have less, and it would all, it would balance out to a good mix that we're looking for. So anyway, that's the other option I would provide. So I think that concludes my comments. I think there may have been some other comments as well. Did anybody?
No, I don't have.
No?
It was covered, thanks.
I did just want to say, I love the idea if it could be made to work to have a drive-through loading zone, but I don't necessarily like the idea of an entry or exit for that loading zone being right off of the park on Market Drive.
Yeah, that was my concern as well.
Yeah, I agree.
And another comment that was brought up was just, I can imagine it being pretty frustrating if you live on the first floor and you have to drive all the way up to the roof of the parking and then get in an elevator and go all the way back down to go to your unit, especially if those are the most family-friendly units and you've got your kids and your stroller and everything else. I think shoppers will be more forgiving if the first floor is a bunch of reserved parking spaces and they just know they have to go up to the second floor and beyond.
Oh, I did have one more comment, actually, and that was I would like to see that redundant corridor access eliminated from the ground floor townhome units. And my solution to the access would be, I mean, we've sort of heard this struggle of getting people that inhabit those units to interact with the street anyway, and when we've heard this potential solution of perhaps bringing the kitchens up to the front. So I would just propose that all of those units just have flush entries and
not be raised at all?
Not be raised at all, because I think the minimal amount that they're raised now doesn't really serve them well. And have that rear corridor access eliminated, which would give more space to the units, which would make them more family-friendly and do a lot of things. So
that means they'd have to go outside to get to the trash room. They have to go outside to get to the elevator. And
yeah, that's what I do now. I don't have a back door that goes anywhere. please, please feel free to respond to any of the feedback that we've given you, and if you don't feel that you have clear direction on anything, feel free to ask us also.
I think generally, terrific feedback, totally on point. I mean, our own self-editing points to a lot of the same things you were saying. So I think a lot of it will just be in the next set of drawings you see. On the loading, you know, when we started this parcel, it was sort of, all right, what are our priorities? Priority one, grocery store at the end of Shell Mound Street, infinitely leasable, great identity, terminates the street, very urban. Priority two was respecting the park and really creating an address on a park, because that park creates terrific value for the residential, not just on Market Drive, but the entire building, because their address is Christie Park. So we got a chance to review that drawing after the January session, and I appreciate the suggestions, but it really seemed that a better objective was to make the park residential relationship strong, and not to allocate so much space to a service function. I think if we could find, whether through clarity or management, another way to address the concerns of deliveries at limited times a day, then I think that would be a more agreeable solution for us in terms of kind of physical allocation of space. But you know, I obviously need you to go along with that.
Yeah, just a couple other thoughts too. As Aaron pointed out, the grocery store is a very important component of this project. It really is what is the driver for the rest of the retail. If we're unable to have the grocery store, we're not going to get the rest of the retail. And the retailers we've talked to in restaurants have made that very clear to us. And one important aspect is parking and availability of parking. And the grocery store has been adamant about the fact that the parking needs to be directly above the store. All the rest of our conditions are like that. We've addressed the access to the residential by basically what amounts to a speed ramp almost, where you come to the second level and you can shoot right up to the third. I can tell you, I've done retail for a long time, and I can tell you if we put the grocery store parking up on the top, the grocery store lease will never happen. We've struggled with this, and we understand the complications, but as you know, this is a complicated project, and we're trying to balance the interests of all components so we can actually bring a project that meets the needs of the community. You know, in terms of the delivery times, I agree we could maybe see about limiting those somewhat, that maybe that works better, so it's not waking people up at 3 in the morning, and you know, maybe that's something that, you know, they don't start till, I don't know what the time is, but not 3. Thank you.
All right, is there any remaining comments or anything from the commission?
I just wanted to comment on, so your idea of these units that front the park and eliminating that corridor, I would just add to that, if that's an option you're going to look into, that you consider having, I'm not saying that I support that, but if you do look at that option, consider having some dedicated residential parking along Market Drive, because now they don't really have, I guess, access from the parking area.
Well, they would just come down in the elevator, right? They just wouldn't have the access to the back of their unit.
Well, all the units above it would, because they have to. It's just the unit, ditch the townhouse units on the ground level.
I still think that the townhomes on the ground level would be because they're eliminating that, or you would be eliminating that corridor, it would just make their unit a bit more desirable if they could be at least closer to, you know, to their cars.
The problem they have is with the building itself, because those bathrooms, et cetera, have to stack over one another, and they wouldn't, because they'd be pushed further back over the corridor on the floors above. So it doesn't really work mechanically.
All right, great. Well, thank you very much. All right. Yeah, do we want to take a short break? All right. We'll take a short 5-minute break, and we will come back for the remaining item. And our next item, well, actually, our next item was to be the, where's my agenda? Was to be the Restoration Hardware outlet store, but that item was continued, and I understand from the staff that perhaps the application has been withdrawn, actually.
It has been withdrawn.
Okay. So with that, we will move on to the last study session, which is the 65th Street multi-unit residential project.
Good evening, Commissioners. So yes, this is 65th Street multi-unit residential. This is the first time you're seeing this. It's a 24-unit building proposed on 65th Street. This would be east of Hollis, between 65th Street and the private Peabody Lane, just west of Vallejo Street, which jogs here in a funny little way. So for the project overview, it's a 24-unit residential building. They're proposing 15 two-bedroom units and 9 three-bedroom units with 42 automobile parking spaces. So issues to consider tonight are which public benefits should be included for them to achieve their bonus points, feedback on design, not of no design, but feedback on design of project and design of units. Are setback variances justified in this circumstance? And are there any considerations for transportation, circulation, or parking? So this photo is a little bit out of date from 2011 from Street View, but this is facing south on 65th Street. And here is from Peabody Lane, facing across the far side there is 65th Street, on the other side, Baker Metal Building. This is a middle property between the Baker Metal Building and another parking lot on the corner. And here is a sketch of the building, the proposed elevation on 65th Street. There is a parking garage on the east side and the residential entrance on the west side. This is the rear of the building towards Peabody Lane. And this is the east elevation of the building, which would face towards what's currently the parking lot. The west side of the building would be against the Baker Metal Building. The proposed ground level is mostly parking with a small residential lobby and also bike parking as well. The podium level would be residential with open space in the center area of that. The third level would also be residential, open to the open space below, as well with the fourth level. This is in the medium high density residential zoning district where multi-unit residential is permitted, and it's also in the North Hollis district overlay, which doesn't modify permitted uses, but does slightly modify setback requirements. For zoning analysis, the floor area ratio, or FAR, in this circumstance, the base is 1.2 with a bonus available of 1.6. The proposed project is about 1.5. For residential unity, the base is up to 50 units per acre, which would equate to 20 units on this property, with a bonus is up to 60 units per acre, which would equate to 24 units on this property, and applicant is proposing 24 units. Building height base is 30 feet with up to 55 feet for a bonus, and the applicant is proposing 42 feet. For building height, the southern elevation has a height limit of 30 feet because it borders a medium residential district where the height is capped at 30 feet. So it has to step up at a 45-degree angle from the middle of Peabody Lane. And from what the applicant has shown, it appears to comply with this standard. In consideration of what's around it in terms of building height, the project area is highlighted here in red, and the proposed project is 42 feet 2 inches tall. Next to it, the Baker Metal Building, that's an existing building of 43 feet 10 inches, and it's approved for residential development, but it'd be reusing the existing building, so the height of that would not change. To the west is the Glass House project, and that project towards the west along Hollis is up to 55 feet tall, but closer to the Greenway it slopes to 33 feet. Across the street at Liquid Sugar, the facade of the building is about 50 feet tall. At Oliver Lofts, it's about 46 feet tall. And catty corner, it's about 45 feet tall. So this proposal is slightly shorter than all of those buildings. For parking, 1.5 spaces are required per unit because all of the units are 2 or more bedrooms, and 0.25 spaces per unit are required for guests, which results in 42 spaces, and the applicant is proposing 42 spaces. For bicycle parking, requirement is 1 space per unit plus 1 space per every 4 guest cars, which results in 27 spaces, and the applicant is proposing 48. For setbacks, in the RMH zone, there's a 5-foot front setback, which this proposal is consistent with, 3-foot interior sides, and 15-foot rear setback. And this application, as presented today, would need modification or variance as proposed because it does not meet those requirements. It's also part of the NH overlay zone, which it appears to comply with. It dictates the setback from the street to the front of the building face. And Baker Metal, there's no south setback. It's comparatively, the Baker Metal building, does not have a south setback. It's an existing non-conforming building, so it does not have a setback, whereas this building requires one unless a variance is granted. For open space, 40 square feet of private open space is required per unit, and this requirement is exceeded. And 20 square feet of common open space per unit is also exceeded. For court dimensions, the minimum court dimensions this proposal is consistent with. It's also consistent with being open to the sky, but not all of the units appear to open onto the court. For landscaping, at least 10% of the site must be landscaped, which would be approximately 1,725 feet. The front setback provides about 725 square feet, and the podium level could provide the additional landscaping. And landscaping details have not been submitted at this time since it's a preliminary proposal right now. For the development bonus, there's 100 bonus points required to build the 24 units because it maximizes the bonus available. There's many eligible bonus categories, as you're probably familiar with, including public open space, sustainable design, public improvements, utility undergrounding, transportation demand management, and a variety of other options as well. Major design review would be required for this project, and it must conform to the Emeryville design guidelines and the North Hollis Area Urban Design Program. Because it's a preliminary stage, the project hasn't been evaluated for conformance at this point. This project was reviewed by the Interdepartmental Staff Meeting Development Coordinating Committee, otherwise known as DCC, on February 25th. At that meeting, staff noted that modifications were needed to meet FAR and parking requirements, and those changes have been made. The applicant was also advised to meet with Building and Fire before submitting any revised plans. Street and sidewalk improvements will be required. Trash room and waste collection details are needed. A transportation study will be required for this project, and staff noted that there are some unusual floor plans and unlabeled rooms submitted so far. So again, issues to be considered this evening are which public benefits should be included, feedback on the design of the project and design of the units, are setback variances justified, and are there any circulation, transportation, or parking considerations? The applicant also has a presentation this evening, so I'm available for questions, or if you'd like to wait until after the applicant presents.
Any questions of staff?
I have a few. You mentioned in the staff report. Can you explain the potential non-compliance of the courts that's on page 3 of the staff report? And something you mentioned just a couple slides back that maybe not all units look out onto the court. I'm not quite sure. Go forward.
Grab the staff report.
Yeah.
I can explain that if you want to bring up the floor plan, just one of the sample floors.
Sure. Thank you, Charlie.
The court requirement in the planning regulations is that opposite any required window, typically bedroom or living room, that if there's a wall facing that window, that the distance between the window and the wall must be equal to at least the height of the wall that's opposite. So you don't get this like light well canyon effect. And that applies to every bedroom and living room window. So if you have a 20-foot high wall, say, across from your window, you have to have at least 20 feet to it. And that court has to be open to the sky. And it has to extend for 10 feet on either side of the center line of the window. So you have a lot of situations here where, for example, this bedroom window right here faces onto this wall right here. And I believe there is another kind of a balcony access thing above this. So this is not open to the sky. It would be the total height of this wall that's above this window, and this is the third level. I believe there's one more level above this, so that would be 20 feet. So this distance is supposed to be 20 feet. And if you go down to the podium level, there's probably 30 feet of this wall above this window, so this distance is supposed to be 30 feet, and it's supposed to be open to the sky. So you have a lot of situations here where here and here and here, this one might be okay, except I'm not sure it's open to the sky. And over here, you know, on every floor, you've got these windows that just face onto walls. So that's the court requirement.
Thank you. In the available bonus point options, they say that we have the option for a bike repair facility, and I'm just kind of asking this question rhetorically, but still kind of need an answer, is if they didn't put in a bike repair station or room, but they put in actual bike lockers, would that somehow qualify, or if it's not specifically listed as a bonus, is it not available?
I believe it's a bike station.
Right, that's what it says in the thing, is a station.
That's like, you know, one of these
repair
things.
station or clean station or something that, yeah, I don't see that here. I don't see where that
Well,
could be
no,
put.
it's more like a public bike parking facility.
Oh, okay.
Like at the Ashby BART station.
Right.
You know, that's a bike station.
Right. Okay.
That's what it's talking about.
So then lockers wouldn't fulfill that need. Okay.
If lockers for the residents?
Yeah.
No,
Okay.
that wouldn't count.
Okay.
They're required anyway, or some kind of secure bike parking is required anyway.
Okay, and then with the Baker Metal Building being grandfathered in, so to speak, it pretty much doesn't have any setbacks. And when they redid that building, because they were reusing the footprint, setbacks weren't required.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. So that necessarily wouldn't be germane to this particular project. And at this time with the East Bay Mud, is it possible for this building to use recycled water for landscaping? Does the water exist from East Bay Mud to this area? I know the Greenway, I think, has it.
I'm not sure if it is for residential at this location.
Because
It would have to be extended. I mean,
I know in our Greenway, we put it on the more southern side of the Greenway where it ends and goes into Ocean Avenue. I know there's purple things in the Greenway landscaping there, but I don't know if it goes over to 65th or not.
probably have to be extended.
And has the developer been fully apprised of our design guidelines currently? So is it something that they're very aware of? And
They've been provided all the links to the relevant documents for the city.
okay. Thanks.
Any other questions for staff?
Yeah, I had a question. This is similar to the court requirement. I noticed that there are a couple of bedroom windows that face other bedroom windows. So do we have any restrictions regarding that as well?
Well, it's the same thing.
Same thing. So it has the same, on the corner.
Like units that are looking across at each other.
Yeah.
Oh, you mean at a 90-degree angle?
Yeah, so right where you bring your cursor down a bit, there's a little small bedroom window.
Oh, here?
Move over, keep going that way. Yeah, right there, on the corner of that center block of units.
Right there.
Yeah, each of those face, like that one.
Or like right here.
That one faces another bedroom, the one that Sean is pointing at,
Yeah.
and, yeah.
There's no rule about bedroom windows that are at a 90-degree angle like that.
The big
Oh, I
question
don't
is the
think so.
fact.
It's
a
not the,
90-degree
it's not
angle.
the angle isn't the question, it's whether they can face each other for privacy reasons. Or-
Right. There's no rule about bedroom windows facing each other for privacy reasons if they are at a 90-degree angle like that.
I
If
think
they-
she's
if
pointing
they
to
were-
two that are not at 90-degree angles, or at least that's
Is
what
this
they
a
would-
window
Two.
right here? Is this
Yeah,
what you're,
those
so this
small
is a little
window.
window, and then this is a larger
Oh.
window?
Yeah, that window.
So the window's directly across
That
from
would
each
violate
other.
the court requirement.
Right.
And then on the other side, it's facing the entrance to,
Right.
If they're directly facing each other, then they need to be separated by the distance that's required by the court requirement.
So the intent of the court requirement is that there be such a distance between the windows that this privacy issue sort of be mitigated?
Yes, it's both for privacy, but mainly it's so that you don't have, light well kind of an effect.
Okay.
Does the court requirement apply when you're adjacent to another building, like another property? 'Cause, I mean, I just bring this up because I know some cities have court requirements for living rooms, but they don't have the same requirement for bedrooms, because typically you end up running bedrooms like 5 feet off of the property line along a side property line.
Ours applies to living room and bedroom windows. I think the maximum distance that's necessary is a little bit less for a bedroom. I think it's 40 feet and 50 feet for a living room. But there is a loophole, I believe, in our regulations that it would not cover
Don't tell us what it is.
I know. I don't think it would cover those units that face the wall on the abutting property. It explicitly says walls on the same property. So that may be something. I mean, the theory is the side setback will take care of that, but actually you don't have a side setback in a lot of the higher density zones. So that's probably something to add to our list of fixes.
You also can't have openings within a certain distance of the property line for building and fire code.
Yeah, but that's only 3 feet usually.
That's enough, right?
I have a question. So I'm guessing the floor plans are more correct than the site plan, but when I look at the site plan, the setback on Peabody is being shown as much more substantial than it is on the floor plans.
Well,
I don't think I included that in here, but I think I'd let the applicant address that.
Well, one thing I believe is that I think the parking podium extends all the way to Peabody Lane, but the upper levels might not.
Oh, that's
It
what's
steps
going on.
back.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't think that is demonstrated very well in this elevation here, but yeah. Sorry.
That's all right.
All right, thanks, Sarah.
All right, thank you. Oh, and so Mr. Dinar will be presenting this evening. Oh, would you like me to?
Perspectives available to us in the
You mean your presentation?
new drawings that we submitted.
Sure.
We have this one, and then there should be.
Why don't you let them know?
Oh, okay. Hi, my name is Moshe Dinar. I'm the architect. Thank you for allowing us to present our project. We have been working as the date for this hearing neared, and we have some additional studies that unfortunately did not make it to the PowerPoint presentation and also didn't make it to your packets. What we have here is I can circulate some packets that include the new drawings that we've added and the new computer-developed perspectives that we've added in addition to the preliminary sketch that you're seeing there.
If you want to walk around and refer to the boards, we can get you a handheld mic.
Right, so you have, if you go here, that's what you're talking about.
Oh, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, so just press that, and this is the presentation
Oh.
you sent me earlier today.
Oh, okay.
So just press the arrow every time you want to go down.
Okay, very good. All right.
And up if you want to go back, okay?
Oh, I got it. Okay.
All right.
Now I got it. All right. So now that I know what to do, thank you. Again, my name is Moshe Dinar, Chair Moss, members of the commission. Thank you very much for allowing us this opportunity. As you know, this project is still in its infancy. We are here to show you our first design effort and our most important concepts, the ideas that brought this project forth and what we would like to achieve. As we looked at the site, we found that some of the areas that have already been developed had a lot of landscaping, had a lot of charm, had a lot of activity, both architecturally, visually, and socially. We find that as you start getting closer to San Pablo, it starts looking more and more like a concrete jungle. And so what we're trying to do is, the first concept was to try to bring back a little bit of that park feeling, a little bit of the greenery feeling, and more of that architectural design look that shows that there's activity behind the walls. So our first concept was to extend the landscaping, set the building back about 10 feet in addition to the sidewalk, and create a landscaped area that is a little bit more substantial than just a planter. Now, what you see in the computer rendering later is just the beginning of this. But the first concept in the sketch was to have maybe that landscaped area be slightly bermed, to add some benches to it, to create a sense that you're walking through something a little bit more lush. Also, we tried to provide a 100% family-friendly project. We have a total of 9 3-bedrooms and 15 2-bedrooms, and they're all large bedrooms. And the reason for this is that we felt that the ability to provide that would also give us the ability to request that we may be able to go up to the 1.6 FAR, which is allowed with bonuses. We also are intending to provide a green building with recycled products, energy efficiency, and other such amenities. As for the architecture, we try to reduce the impact of the 4-story building by setting the 4th floor back and creating sort of a roof canopy that comes over it, over the balconies, and while at the same time saying that these are open spaces, but they're also protected open spaces. We wanted to have an inviting 2-story entrance, which was not like saying, this is private, don't come in here. What we wanted was something that says, this is an inviting place, come visit. So consequently, we have a nicely designed 2-story entrance that is a happening on the building. Every element on the facade of the building is articulated especially to denote its function. So the living rooms are in the wider volumes, the bedrooms have balconies, the stair towers. There is sunshades on the facade that are specifically expressed within a certain rhythm. And we also have a rhythm of balcony materials that keeps changing, so that you don't have this continuous look of a building that is repetitive, but rather a building that says, aha, this facade has 6 families in it. It's not just an apartment building. I'll take you quickly through some of the images. This is the first computer visualization study that you're seeing of the original sketch that we produced. Obviously, there's some things that we've learned immediately, is that the 4th floor canopy is a little too deep. We intend to set it back. But basically, we've been able to maintain some of the same architectural and also scale-giving elements that we had in the original design. The ground level planted area is still left boxy. We would like to get an opinion from you, what you think about doing something a little more interesting, such as a berm or something a little more special. You can see how the entrance is articulated along the facade. We have started thinking about what types of materials we'd like to use, all of them green materials, 100% recycled content. We've started thinking of the type of planter boxes we want, the residential bike lockers. Some of the colors are very preliminary, but we do intend to have porcelain tile up to the first floor in 2 different tones, or we would like to have maybe the railings be a combination of metal and glass, possibly some wood if we can deal with the issue of maintenance. Here are the pictures that Sarah has already shown you. Again, you see that the building is designed as a C-shaped building or a U-shaped building. The hope, of course, is that the person who buys the parcel next to it will also build a building with a courtyard in the middle, so that you have at least a larger visual courtyard, even though these courtyards would be separated by a property line, but at least there would be the encouragement to create a larger open space visually for both buildings. The parking, as Director Bryant explained, the parking goes all the way to the back of the property. The residential sets back. And as you can see, the residential sets back. We do have a substantial courtyard. I agree with you that the bedrooms with the windows facing the wall need to be studied. What I'd like to say about this type of unit design that we're proposing here, we've been doing residential and mixed use in the Bay Area for about 30 years. And we find that there are very few situations where we can actually have through units. In other words, these units getting natural light from the front and the back. And that is true of all of them. Most apartment buildings and condominium buildings, you have one solid side, all the light, unless it's a corner unit, all the light comes through from the front. There's nothing. The bedrooms on the side get nothing. You can't put bedrooms on the side. But because we have this idea that everything should be 3 bedrooms or 2 bedrooms, so it's family, we decided to do it this way. And that requires a little bit more frontage than would normally be required. Now, if you look at the 3-bedroom units, what did I do here? If you notice, the 3-bedroom units have a squarish design. They have a kitchen, dining, and living in the center with a large deck. And then they have a bedroom and a master bedroom suite. They have a 3rd bedroom that borrows light from this space here, which is the space that we need to work on, and I'm sure it'll be probably one of your first comments. But there's a 4th space in the geometry that is almost given to us by the nature of the geometry. And what do we do with this? For the last 10 to 15 years, we are seeing a lot more families, people asking for a place to work at home. We started designing our units with little corners where you could put a computer in. This has actually morphed into an actual extra space in each unit that allows people to work out of their house. Not everybody these days has a full-time job. Many have part-time jobs and would like to do additional work at home, consult, bring some additional income. I think it's great to have an extra room, and I understand that there was a question, what are these rooms? What are they? They don't have closets, so could they possibly be, bootleg bedrooms? No. What they really are is something that people really need today, which is a place to work at home. And do so, with dignity, without having to run around with the kids and all that, and have the ability to do some work at home. And so we are submitting these units as a prototype of a 3-bedroom that we have been using recently that has, it's really a 4-axis unit, but it has one room that's devoted as kind of you choose your use room.
So is the desk that's shown there, is that built in?
No, it would not be built in. It would not be built-in. People would have to their own. But the extra room or bonus room or whatever you want to call it, its function is to create either a den or a home office or simply a workspace where a person can take their computer and do some work. So that's the concept.
Okay,
Now,
but it does meet the definition of bedroom in the planning regulations, right? Is that, maybe the staff can confirm that? I can read the definition if you want.
Okay.
Bedroom means any room having the potential of being a bedroom and meeting the standards of the California Building Code as a sleeping room.
I think it would, but I don't know that that makes a great deal of difference. I mean, our parking requirements would not change. It's, there's really the break for parking is between 1 and 2 bedrooms. For 1 and fewer, it's less, and for 2 and more, it's greater. But other than that, there's no other regulations that hinge on bedrooms. So whether it's 3 bedrooms or 4 bedrooms, I don't really think makes a lot of difference.
Yeah, no, my point is just we should count them as 4-bedroom units.
Oh, okay.
Again, I'm not an expert on the Emeryville Planning Zoning Code, but there are some jurisdictions where a bedroom is defined if it has a closet. We didn't put one in just to give that option. But again, as Director Bryan said, whatever the definition is, we would like to have this option included within our project to create a place where somebody can do some work that is separate from a bedroom, that is separate from a living and a dining room. The rest of the floors are similar. The only thing is that the 4th floor is set back on both ends, and there's a long deck which is partially covered. And these are just a preliminary massing elevations and some more ideas. Right now, this elevation, which would be up against the adjoining new project, presents a situation where there's a substantial amount of blank wall which might be there for a while until somebody decides to build next door. We would like, even though we can't put windows in it, we would like to come back to you with some sort of a architectural design idea, color idea that would make it a little bit more interesting and more palatable rather than having a large blank wall. This is a typical urban problem. What do you do with the property line sidewall that you can't put windows in? So we would like to make a recommendation to you about what we're thinking about. Finally, I'd like to end and then get as much input as possible. We can easily qualify for the 100 points that are required, and probably even more, in the sense that we have substantial open space, we have 100% family-friendly housing, we have completely concealed mechanical equipment on the roof, utility underground. We will obviously have to create a TDM plan, since a parking study transportation study may be required, and we are committed to sustainable design. If we put all those points together, I think we can easily get the 100 points, if not more. And so we're asking to go up to the 1.6 FAR. And I really appreciate the comments you made about those bedrooms, and that's going to be our first design task tomorrow. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
I have a question. So is the intent to provide a washer dryer in each unit?
Correct.
And if not, is there an on-site facility planned?
No. Every
Okay.
unit has a washer dryer.
Some of the units I had trouble locating where that was, so.
Oh, I'm
yes,
sorry.
Just take a
it's
look.
kind of a small. Again, as I said, it's kind of early in the game. We don't have enlarged unit plans for you, and but yes, there is a washer dryer in each unit.
Okay.
Can you explain the garage, the parking structure to me? I don't need to see it. It's just that it shows glazing on the north and south side. So are those going to be windows glazed? And if that's the case, how is the garage going to be ventilated?
No, they are not. They are not windows. They're openings, and what we'd like to recommend is some sort of an attractive louver system.
Okay.
That is architecturally coherent and attractive. I believe that given the amount of solid wall around that garage, that some mechanical ventilation will be required, but we are also going to put, as I said, high windows. We don't want anybody looking into the garage. But the issue that I brought up earlier is when you have high windows in the garage, what do you do with the wall underneath it? Mm-hmm. And typically that's the ugliest part of apartment buildings. I mean, what do people do? They do concrete block and they paint it. That's not what we want to do. Even if we put porcelain tile on it, it's still going to be a blank wall. That was the idea of trying to bring up the landscaping a little bit higher so that what you're looking at is greenery rather than a garage wall.
Yeah. I like that whole concept and what you're saying. When you get to that point, whether it's at the final study session or when you come back for approval, I'd like to see what those ventilation things are going to look like. I kind of like need to see
Absolutely.
a full explanation of
Absolutely.
what they're. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Other questions for the applicant? All right, thank you. All right, with that, we'll go ahead and open the public comment. So it appears that we might have a lot of speakers, so if maybe if we want to form a line so that we can kind of take one speaker after another quickly, I think that would be prudent. So if someone wants to come forward and get us started, and then others can maybe line up behind them.
So before the speakers start, let me just say there's a 3-minute time limit for each speaker. And please, after you speak, would you go over to the clipboard that's over there by Sarah and sign your name so we can get it for the record? Thank you. After you speak. After you speak. Yes.
Are we on the clock? Good evening. My name is Shamsad. I am the owner of Baker Building adjacent to the project. And I was hoping for a more conducive design in reference to my situation. We were approved to develop that warehouse, and one of the conditions was the maintaining the architectural shape of the building to have industrial look, so-called, for the area as the 1900th century, 1900 architectural a standard of Emeryville. I was hoping that the setback was such then we would keep the shape of the building the same. So as you go by from either side, you'll be able to see the integrity of architecture. And the way it is right now is going to give us a lot of trouble to create anything in that side. I'm sort of hoping that you folks give it a consideration, perhaps moving the whole project forward, such that there is a space between, or could be used for driveway, or could also allow us to develop that building, because as it is, we're pretty much locked up in there. And I like the project itself, perhaps too massive for the site, but as far as my situation is concerned, I will need some help. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Rene Brünger. I live on 65th Street at Oliver Loft, and I feel personally very much affected by this project because I live on the ground floor. We have huge high windows facing 65th Street right across from this building. So what I'm looking at from my living room or bedroom is an empty lot that will be filled by this massive construction, very high. I would like to know how much light will be taken away by this project, and also my living room goes right out to the, my bedroom goes right out to the street. And it's already pretty noisy at night. The traffic has increased over the years, and I was wondering how this building will affect the noise and the traffic. And so, yeah, these are my probably very personal concerns. Also, if this construction is going on, how long will it probably take? A year or a year and a half? And I would like to get some answers. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Felicia Wojtak, and I'm actually the owner of the parking lot, which is on the other side of the building, and the building that's kitty corner, that was mentioned in the earlier drawings. So I wanted to first say that that parking lot is a requirement for parking for our office building, which is kitty corner, so there's no intention to develop that at any time with any other kind of project, because we need that parking lot. But first, I also wanted to say, too, that we like the way the facade looks. It seems to fit in nicely with the neighborhood. I also know that it's very expensive construction as originally drawn, so I hope you'll be able to, the developer will be able to follow through with making that things look as attractive as they look on the drawings. Then my other question I did have was if this was a rental or were these condominiums. One concern I have with looking at the large bedrooms that are set up like this looks like it might be designed possibly for multiple adult living environments, which means there will be a lot more cars involved. And so if that's the case, you know, where is the parking going to be? Because that neighborhood has gotten a lot more dense over the last few years, and so parking might be an issue if, in fact, the 3-bedroom, almost 4-bedroom unit has 4 adults living in it together sharing a rental. So that would be a concern. One thing, too, we have with the adjacent parking lot and the development of it seeming to be right to the property line, exactly to the east, as you see on the drawing, is the pathway into our garage. So no construction equipment could be placed on our lot during construction, as we need that for people to get in and out of the parking lot. That's actually the circulation area right there to come in directly to the east of that project into our parking lot and then around to the parking spaces in it. So that would be a concern on any kind of construction scheduling. We cannot lose that our parking lot right there for that. And so I think that's pretty much it. But those were some of the concerns I had. Again, we like the way it looks, but no, it's pretty dense, and are concerned about, you know, the density in the neighborhood and the use of the parking lot for our tenants in the building across the street. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak on this item? All right, seeing none, we'll close the public comment, and we will bring this back to the commission for discussion. Commissioner Keller, do you want to get us started?
Okay, gladly. First of all, I like the project. There seems to be lots to work out, so there'll be lots of homework for you all. I do like the office space. As a person who lives in a 2-bedroom unit and has a spouse who works at home, often it's unfortunate that we have to have a guest room that's shared with an office in a space like this. I think is very current and timely, and I think that, you know, the concerns that it could become a bedroom. I mean, people can turn dining rooms into a bedroom. When my mother was a child, she slept in a dining room. So if that's what people are going to do, that's what people are going to do. In his latest drawings, I saw that they had bike lockers. I'm very much in support of that. I'd like to see at least 12 bike lockers included in this project, but 6 would be a minimum that I would like to see. These are the exact same lockers I use every day, and they're very useful. And it's nice to know that I always have a place to park. I can keep my helmet. I have a bike pump in there, and I think they're vital, and they're something we need to look at more in our projects. I do like the berm landscape as opposed to the raised planter bed. I think it's kind of a more graceful and friendly look, and it's more kind of like open. So if that can still be incorporated as in the first illustration, I really kind of like that. And I'm also really happy, back to the bikes, of the multiple areas that you have bike parking on the several different floors. I think that's really nice to spread that around. I'm happy with the unit mix. I love that they have 9-foot ceilings. I live with 9-foot ceilings, and it's just kind of an amazing difference in when you live in 8-foot ceilings. So I think that kind of adds or goes to the whole height thing. And we might need to look at that, the variances for that or the conditional uses. I don't have a problem with how some of the bedrooms open onto the public spaces. I've been in places that are unique or different like that, and I think people kind of adapt their lifestyles to that, and I think it's a give and take to get family-friendly sized units. We can't get 100% of what we think would make a perfect family-friendly unit. So I wanted to just address some of the, there wasn't a lot of talk on it, but we did get some emails on parking. I think Emeryville's fairly new parking requirements are kind of more reflective and more of the current thought, more current thoughts of today's parking and concepts, as opposed to the old school auto-centric parking. This plan meets our current guidelines for parking, and I don't think that there's a problem with that. We have to, as a member of Transform, it's a group that's doing a survey on parking, and they actually just finished one at PPP with me, and what they're finding is most places are overparked. My building, PPP, has a 5-story parking structure. People don't use it, they park on the street because that's what's convenient. So you could put in 100 parking places in this. If it's more convenient for people to park on the street, they're gonna park on the street. But if you plan for cars, we're gonna get more cars. If our zoning says 42, I think we need to leave it at 42. I don't wanna add more parking for cars. So, and I really don't envy you. I think this courtyard window thing is going to be a real thorn in your side. And I like to provide options or maybe suggestions, but for this, I simply don't have it. And just maybe working with Charlie and his group, maybe you can come up with some answers. But I wish you a lot of luck in that. For right now, that's it.
Well, I think it's a very interesting project. I like the 3 or 4 bedroom units, and I question some of the sizes of the bedrooms. They look like they're maybe 9 feet wide in some of the smaller units. But I think the big problem is going to be the windows looking out into spaces that aren't big enough. And they're covered for the most part. And however that's going to be resolved, I don't know. But it looks like a killer to me, so have to see what happens.
I think that the design of the project, I'm really liking the palette that you've chosen, and I think that using sustainable materials is definitely a good way to go, and I really applaud you for heading down that path. Some of the design comments that I do have relate to the layout, really the floor plan. I do really support the 100% family-friendly housing, but I think that the layout is just a bit repetitive and just needs some work in terms of mixing it up a bit. And then also, if this is going to be 100% family-friendly housing, I think that the common landscape area should incorporate some spaces for people with families. The previous project that you were here for had some examples of that, spaces that could be used for entertainment, and maybe also a play area. There definitely is a challenge with the units that face the courtyard, and particularly the units that have, or their patios are also facing that common landscape area, so you'll definitely need to look at that in terms of allowing some privacy for those units that have patios that are on the common area. And then as far as bonus points, the ones that are a priority, in my opinion, would be the sustainable design, the 100% or the family-friendly housing, and underground utility, which I think you mentioned, and alternative energy would be something worth pursuing. Those are my comments.
I think I just need to back up a little bit because in looking at the need for a variance for the setbacks and looking at our variance regulation, I don't think that I could make findings to support a variance that would allow for the setback to be changed. So I think that that's a big hurdle to get over because I don't see how there are special circumstances with this piece of property that would make it, that would justify a variance. So I think that that is one thing that might be a major impact on shaping the project going forward. I do think also, since we put a high value on the Baker building, that it's true that we would like to see the Baker building as well. So that's another reason for the setback not to be done away with. I also, I really think the family-friendly aspect is great. I think the sustainability, if you move in that direction, is great. But I would also like to see ground floor units on the street side. There's ground floor units on other places on that street, and I think that activating that street and having some units that open up onto the sidewalk would be preferable to having landscaping or porcelain tile or planter boxes in front of the parking garage. I also agree that the situation, I understand the concept of getting light through from both sides, and I think that's great, but in those hallway areas, I think it's going to be very enclosed and cramped feeling, and I think there are also a number of spaces in the circulation spaces that are kind of narrow and cramped and could be opened up a little bit more. For example, the ground floor lobby where you come from the garage into the lobby area, there's pinch points there, and some of the hallways that go to the exit stairs by the open space are also have some very narrow pinch points. And I think it'll be great to see something go in on that site. Really, the family-friendly housing is a wonderful thing that I'd like to see move forward, and I think that it needs to be pulled in a little bit.
Yeah, I think I really feel like the north facade is very strong. I'd like to see the south facade, at least some renderings of it or something that gives us a better example of how that's intended to play out. It seems like the north facade utilizes large overhangs a lot as kind of design elements, and I worry that's going to be pretty dark, being that it's already north facing, but I don't want to mess with the facade too much in that respect either, because I think some of the overhangs and the things you're doing with them are creating some really nice spaces. I want to repeat Commissioner Donaldson's comment about the parking and the street. I mean, I see what you're trying to do with the berm, but I think basically what this really needs is taking units down to the street level to really activate it. I think what we ended up with here is parking, basically a parking garage on both streets that this property borders, and especially on the north side, I don't really feel like that's appropriate. I feel like we should be bringing the units down to the street level and activating that street. As much as we might try to landscape that issue away, what we end up with is really just a parking garage facing the street. I agree. I don't really see an argument for the variances regarding the setbacks, in particular the one along Peabody. I mean, right now, I think there's a single-family home right across the street from this. That's a small structure, and to have this structure with the garage in particular right up against the property line across the street doesn't seem appropriate. And I could see, granted, the neighbors to the east, if they don't mind being right on the property line, you being right on the property line, I could see that being okay, but then the ones to the west already expressed their concerns, and I understand those. Of course, that's only going to buy 3 feet, but it's something. As far as family-friendly design, I mean, I look at the units and I see units with lots of bedrooms, but I also see lots of small bedrooms, and they're all sort of opening off of the common spaces. And then the common spaces themselves are very small. Looks to me like even in the 4-bedroom or 3 or 4-bedroom units, whatever you want to call them, the common spaces only account for about 250 square feet. Which it seems really small to me for a unit of that size. I can't imagine a family having, their kitchen, living room, dining room space that small. Let's see here. And then, yeah, it'd be nice to see, I love the large courtyard. I'd like to see what's intended there that's really gonna bring people to that space. I think we saw some good examples on the upper, on the roof terrace of the previous project with the barbecue, bar, lounge area, bocce ball court, the fire table, things along those lines that will actually bring people to that space to utilize it. As far as the bedrooms and the court issue, it's a conundrum because, frankly, I disagree with the court requirement with regard to the bedrooms. I don't really see why that's so important, and it ends up really kind of shaping spaces in a way that I don't think is necessary, and it sort of contradicts what's typically done when you have one building up against another. So I understand it with regard to living spaces, living room spaces. You don't want your living room facing a wall, or your kitchen necessarily facing a wall, but a bedroom isn't a space that you go in to stare out the window. And it's nice to have some natural light, but most of the time you're in your bedroom. It's not when the lights are, when the sun's out. So it's just it's unfortunate, and I'm look forward to seeing how you work that out with the staff. That's it.
I'll just say that I agree with just about every other comment that's been said. Just to kind of summarize them, yeah, I agree that I think the north elevation is pretty strong. I generally kind of like the materials and colors that you're showing. I also, in reviewing the variance findings, I don't see how we could make them in this case. What else? I will say the one other thing that I want to talk about is I probably should talk about the bonuses. As far as what bonuses we might want to see, what bonus points we might want to see in award, I think, green building components would be great. It'd be great to see a LEED gold building, for example, or, some other components like that. I think we, I'm a little hesitant to award points for family-friendly housing just because of kind of the direction things are going, even though it's in the code. But I think under this scenario, you're proposing 100%, and I think that's, is beyond what will probably ever end up being required. So I applaud you, and I think we could award some points for that. I do actually want to ask staff, there's no public open space requirement for this project? Or publicly accessible open space?
Oh, you mean accessible to the general public?
Yes, don't we have that in some instances?
No, not for residential projects.
Oh.
For non-residential projects, there's supposed to be a certain amount of common open space for the people who work there. And then there is, I think, if it gets over a certain size, then there's a certain amount of public open space also. But for residential, there's no public open space required.
Oh, okay. Then the one other thing I want to say actually is about the units. One of the reasons I was asking about that bonus room is that I think in theory it's a great idea. It's, I would love to have such a room that could be, used for anything I chose. And I think it's a great amenity, but in this example, I think that one of the issues I think with these units is that in all of them, the shared spaces look very small to me. None of them are shown as accommodating a full-size sofa. They're all shown with love seats, and so I think on those units, I would rather see that space reappropriated to the common living area to make it function more appropriately and more versatilely for a family. I think in the situation they're shown in now, you could have a family living there, but not everyone would be able to sit and watch TV at the same time in the living room, for example. So it pains me a little bit to say it because I love that amenity of having that bonus room, that flexible room. But in this case, I see those living spaces as very constrained, and I think the space would be much better appropriated towards those. So I think that more. Oh, and I do think you are going to have to. Just try and see what you can do to meet the court requirement. But I do think that's going to inform the design largely. So that concludes my comments.
Chair Moss, could I just make a comment on the court requirement? As I think it came up during the previous study sessions on the NADI site, 6701 Shell Mound, where we pointed out that some of those units didn't appear to meet the court requirement. Unfortunately, the way the code is currently written, there's no wiggle room in that court requirement. It's a pretty hard and fast rule. That's another thing that's on our list of fixes, where we need to maybe provide a little bit of flexibility. Maybe it's a certain percentage, or maybe there could be some discretion of the commission to adjust it a little bit. Although this, I think, is a rather extreme example, but Commissioner Gunkel also makes the point that, well, maybe it shouldn't apply to bedrooms. I mean, all the ones I'm familiar with have applied to bedrooms, so I don't know. But at any rate, currently, under the current regulations, there's really no wiggle room. So if you wanted to approve something that didn't comply, that too would require a variance. So in addition to the setback variance, you'd also need a court requirement variance.
Yeah, I think I remember that from the NADI project, that it was very hard and fast. All right, does anyone have any other comments on this project?
The applicant.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes, yes. Yeah, please, come back up, yes.
Thank you, I thought it was all closed, but I just want to say there's a few things that are of concern to you and are obviously very important to us, and also have been said by some of the speakers. The Baker Building is a very large building. Mm-hmm. It's one big, giant metal building. It's right on the property line. It doesn't matter what architect or what developer comes in, it's going to be very hard to be able to utilize the site that we have and set enough space to create an access road for the Baker Building. The Baker Building, unfortunately, is an existing building. It will have to deal with its own environmental planning and circulation issues. For us to take 20 feet away of our site to provide a common access road of some sort would pretty much nullify our ability to do anything on that site. For one thing, we need 42 cars. That fills up the whole first floor. I mean, there's certain realities that must be understood, and as much as we would like to respect this gentleman's request, it is impossible if we're going to set our building back so far, our courtyard will be gone. We won't get enough parking. So this is a very important issue, and the Baker building is a very interesting building. I actually like the building. I like seeing something that large there. But at the same time, it by virtue of its size and the fact that it has no windows, it poses a problem to any designer. I'm sorry.
Oh, no,
any designer that builds against it.
Chair Moss, could I just chime in here for a second?
Yeah.
I don't think you should perseverate too much on this concern. I didn't hear any of the commissioners raise it.
I agree.
It was a public speaker who raised it.
Yeah.
And I would also just like to point out that the Baker Metal Building has an existing entitlement that was granted years ago for its reuse by this planning commission. Well, not this planning commission, but by the some of these planning commissioners. And that entitlement does not provide any kind of access on the adjacent property.
No.
It's just, it's on its own property. So.
And those entitlements are still active?
Yes, that's because, for better or for worse, they were all wrapped together with the 5 townhouses that are currently under construction on Ocean Avenue, because it's all one piece of property. So it's all covered by one use permit. So by virtue of those townhouses now being virtually completed, the entire project is vested.
Mm-hmm.
So the Baker Metal building can be, redone pursuant to those entitlements. But it doesn't have anything to do with the property next door.
Right.
So the only variance we're talking about is there needs to be a 3-foot setback from the Baker building to this building.
Yes, and if I could just say, I don't know if we said this in the staff report, but I think that variance could be justified. It's similar to the situation you had on Doyle Street,
right,
where the project had a 20-foot blank wall. Right. And what's the point of having a 3-foot wide canyon?
Because the Baker Metal building on that side, on the east side, is not proposed to have windows, correct?
No, I don't believe they'd be able to.
If I remember it right, it didn't have the windows. So we're going to have a 3-foot canyon that's between 2 solid walls, and what's the point of that?
Although I don't believe you could make the same kind of finding of unique circumstance on the
Peabody
east side or on Peabody.
Well, also similar is not a great word when you're talking about variance findings. So
actually, if I may just, the units that the rear faces the Baker building are almost 15 feet back. So we actually do have a setback there. Where we don't have a setback is where we have blank walls. So we do offer somewhat of a setback, but that's really about as much as I think as can be expected. Thank you, and I'm sorry to interrupt your conversation.
No, that's all right. Thank you. All right. So with that, are there any other comments regarding this project? Okay. All right. Great. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
So with that, we will move on to commissioner comments. Are there any comments from the commission?
Should I take this one?
Just to, when you guys were talking while I had to recuse myself, you were asking about the Park on Powell. I talked with the leasing agent in that, and that unit is going to, or that complex, I believe he was telling me is going to have 9 3-bedroom units. There's 4 in the completed building and 5 in the new one, and currently they have 3 rented to people with families. And one is pre-rented in the not completed building yet, and he told me it's going to be a single man with 2 children is renting that. And the prices for the 3-bedroom units, the pre-lease pricing was $3,800, and that the newer building, when it reaches the market, will be at the current market value, like Emmy Apartments, at $4,100 a month.
Thanks for that update. Any other comments? All right, then we're adjourned.
$4,000.